Are you ready for this? So, we are going to review Vegan Gains versus Destiny, screaming at each other in an insane debate. This is like their millionth debate. I never get debates for whatever reason. Vegan Gains, just for being a big fancy channel, gets all the debates, okay? So I'm, if anything, a little bit peeved. Where's my socialism debate, Stephen? Right, okay. Let's watch this inevitable shit show, shall we?
Line with holocausting said human beings. And then
wait.
Why is it always...
when you can actually...
So
I
when
don't know what
say,
you mean by many differences.
yeah, you
like,
keep
clearly
screaming,
there are
I don't know what you mean, and then you keep
differences.
talking. I can just tell you what I mean. Do you want me to tell you what I mean, or do you want to keep grandstanding?
Please.
Okay. What do you think anthropomorphic
I don't-
means?
Well, humanize.
Yeah, I don't have to humanize a human.
I don't even know why I bothered arguing that point with you, but...
First of all, if I'm looking at the brain, I'm like,
Has a
and you
cerebral
laughed and you
cortex,
said,
a
"Oh my
dog has a
God,
hypothalamus."
obviously the structure's different." So tell me, what structure is there at 9 months that's not here at 100 days? You wanted to look at the pictures, and now we're looking at it.
Okay. My guess, for most of this, Destiny's going to troll Vegan Gains. That's what happens every time. Let's see if I'm right.
So tell me, we're looking at the picture. It's in
I'm
100
not
days.
saying there isn't a structure that isn't
Oh,
present
so
at
they're
6
structurally
months.
identical then.
Like,
So
I
would you say
mean-
structurally these two things are different?
Okay, Destiny, if I were to show you...
Like, I'm guessing Vegan Gains is saying that there is the actual, essentially part of, there's a difference between the part of the brain and essentially the neural connections within that part of the brain that essentially allow for the capacity to perform a specific act. So, for example, you might have a frontal lobe, like the sort of, or like the like, you know, your cortex, but the interconnections between the various parts of the brain, between the various within that same part, but even within the same part of the brain, which allow for essentially certain specific actions to function, are not formed at birth. Which we kind of know. This is brain plasticity. This is the development of essentially the brain throughout childhood or onto adulthood, right? And he's saying that simply is not there. And so like an individual would lack a capacity to perform a specific act. Whilst Destiny is saying because they have those specific parts of their brain, then they can, in theory, perform those acts. One, I'd like to point out this is all bullshit because this relies upon a very reductivist version of the brain. Brains are not as like basic as what essentially is made out, that essentially if you remove a part of the brain, that functionality is necessarily gone. You've got people that perform, like you've had people lose large quantities of their brains. Their IQ doesn't drop. They might have small amounts of brains. Their IQ might be still relatively high. They might still have all the sort of autonomic functions. So, you know, it's not as simple as take a part of the brain out. The brain no longer is able to perform those tasks. Because of brain plasticity, like parts of the brain can even compensate. You have people who certain functions move from one part of the brain to the other, and that changes how the function works. Like there's this like freak who's like I was saying freak, it's actually like a superpower kind of thing. Whereas he was on Stanley's Superhumans, where he's the scanned him and they believe that he's mathematical reasoning had moved to where his eye functioning is, and because the neurological connections between the neurons are so dense in where your eye movement is, because of the complexity of the function, because of how dense they are compared to the mathematical reasoning, he's essentially like massively upped his processing power in terms of his thinking there, and the time, the capability of his thinking. But like that seems to go against the idea that like a specific capacity is tied to a specific part of the brain. So yeah, but we'll see. We'll get into it. Let's see how it goes.
Two things I wanted to bring up. First was about Fuentes. You actually missed kind of a funny opportunity to embarrass him on that Fresh and Fit stream. Zerka said that Fuentes was a straight white male. You should have pointed out that he isn't straight. He is just a white male.
I mean, like, I think we got to that later once he started calling me a cuck, but whether or not he's gay, these are just like accusations. There's no way to actually prove that, right?
Okay, well, let's be real. But anyway, other thing I wanted to ask you about. You're on that other, like, Red Pill podcast or some shit, and you're debating those conservative women on abortion.
Uh-huh.
That
Who beat Destiny? Yes.
was a super cringe debate. They were terrible.
I don't know what he's talking about.
Unforgettable.
I think they did a better job than Destiny. Ooh.
How come you used the, like, you went with a position that, you know, fetal sentience or fetal consciousness arises around 20-week mark, versus your position with me where you cared about language?
My position with you caring about language was differentiating human consciousness versus animal consciousness. My argument with them was about when does consciousness begin to start.
But why would that matter if we're talking about moral consideration? If you say, why does it matter if it's human or not human? Like, and also you could say that consciousness, until it develops language, is not human anyway, because that's one of the prerequisites you're given for humanity. So if it doesn't have language, then it's not human. It's pre-human. So even if it's conscious, it shouldn't be valuable to you. So go for the other date, yeah?
Okay. But you, like, again, that doesn't exactly follow because, okay, even if we grant that consciousness arises around the 20-week mark, you said the differentiating factor between humans and animals is language when it comes to.
I agree, DJ, but this is where this is what Destiny's argument is. It's not mine. Like, I don't think that what defines us as human is essentially our linguistic capacities, but that's what Destiny's arguing for.
To conscious experience.
I said that was one differentiating factor, but I mean, I think our capacity for language shows that we have a wholly different type of sentient experience than whatever even the smartest animal has.
Okay, how? Why? What reason do we have to say that the capacity to engage in language necessitates that we have a radically different form of sentience?
Right, but you said that fetal ability to either understand, well, I guess your position was understand language.
I don't know if fetuses can necessarily understand language. They might be able to, they might not be able to. I just know that the parts necessary in a brain for having conscious experience emerge from 20 to 28 weeks.
Well, sure.
You don't know that. I mean, because one, that's not scientific proof. Like, there's not scientific evidence to show that. The evidence shows that the cortex develops around that point. But the arguments to that for the cortex development to be essentially indicative of consciousness are pretty weak, and it relies upon normally what is a consideration of higher order theories of consciousness. There's no reason to think that there isn't consciousness prior to the cortex. I think even as early as 11 weeks. This is even debated about in the literature, specifically on whether there should be administering anesthesia to fetuses during abortion, because it seems that there is a solid argument to be made, and this was, I'll have to find the paper, that they are experiencing pain, especially towards like 18 weeks, and even sooner than that, even from earlier than 11 weeks.
I could agree on that, but again, your stance was if a human being was incapable of understanding language, you'd be fine with holocausting said human beings.
If a human being, like, well, true. So, like, I'd be okay with holocausting, like, 16-week-old fetuses. Yes.
What was that?
Be okay with Holocaust.
Said human being. Ending language, you'd be fine with holocausting said human beings.
If a human
just
being,
like-
well, true. So like, I'd be okay with holocausting like 16-week-old fetuses. Yes. If there were
Right,
human
but
beings that could
like
never
out of-
develop the capacity for language, then
Yeah, like what happens if there's a human born without the capacity to develop language that is severely disabled?
I'd probably be fine holocausting them. I don't think those would be.
What the fuck? Why do people? How can people watch that and not be like, that is absolutely morally revolting? Like, come on, man. Like, non-linguistic autistics, right? Like, Holocaust them, and I guess they're probably linguistic because that is non-verbal. But like, there's certainly non-linguistic disabled people, like mentally handicapped people. Like, come on, man. Like, fucking fascist. Like, this is eugenics, right? Like, ableism and eugenics. Very Peter Singer. Like, it's oh god, that's sickening.
Human beings. It would be something fundamentally different.
Okay, well,
And the thing is, I'm not just saying that it's sickening from a point of revulsion. I am revolted, but I think that it is morally wrong anyway, because what is considerable is sentience and not some sort of abstract notion of sentience anyway. Then why are we even caring about language? Like, why does any of this matter? Even, especially, it's not even just language; it's the capacity for language. I don't know why any of this matters.
so there's an element of being able to in the future here.
No, a conscious human experience like has a whole bunch of qualifiers to it that make it fundamentally separate from like an animal conscious experience. One of those huge distinctions seems to be our capacity for whatever a priori knowledge we need to comprehend and deploy language.
But that's bullshit, because I think you can see in terms of animals, they have the same rational capabilities, just to a lesser degree. Alistair McIntyre talks about this in Dependent Rational Animals. This is, if anything, this is a non-evolutionary take. Like, for this, you are actually arguing for essentially a break away from our animality entirely. You're like, there is something just radically special about us that differentiates us from all other animals that's essentially emerged at the point in which you're capable of language. Where, if anything, what we see is essentially, as we scale up towards the human capability of language, we see that animals have a lesser or greater to a lesser and greater degree capable of concept formation, expressing decisions in relation to certain events, acclimating those reports, and acknowledging them and taking action in relation to them. Like, all of the sort of behavioral and conceptual prerequisites for language and rational prerequisites for language exist in animals, just to a lesser degree. They just don't have the means of creating a complex enough social structure, or rather like a psychological structure, to alienate themselves from themselves, which is actually like, this is like, you have to not only have the capacity to have language, you have to have already engaged to be engaging in language to a fairly decent level, where you start in gaining the point of like the I, if you will. I mean, it's sort of the foundation for language, and in sort of, you do need the natural capacity. I will say, like, it is tied to our intellect, like, of course, like, that's the point. But you see this as a sort of, as we gain, like, not until at least after like the mirror stage would a child have this. So he should be okay, really, with killing any infant under 6 months, based on this standard, at least. Based on this standard, because they do not have the capacity to psychologically alienate themselves to the point in which they can recognize themselves in a mirror, and they certainly do not have the capacity to recognize themselves in the other, where they're capable of mimicking and mirroring the parents to the point in which they are internalizing their own self in relation to the parents. And this is developing really largely for the first few years of their life. This is so like, so I'm just want to say that this isn't like, come on, man.
Now, how sophisticated can a newborn do that, or a 20-year-old? I'm not sure. Maybe that is still developing, but I don't think the stages of development of human conscious experience are, we start with lizard consciousness, then we evolve to chicken consciousness, then it evolves to ape consciousness, and then we level up to human consciousness.
I mean, when we're talking about rational linguistic capacities, we can't actually use markers to indicate levels of communication, social development, rational conceptualization, in relation to things like problem-solving skills, in relation to like socially communicated concepts. So yeah, kind of.
I would imagine it's human conscious the entire time.
And even then, it's not that the consciousness is changing. What's changing is essentially our relationship to our consciousness. The value's not changing. The value is essentially the fact that we are experiencing positive or negative is what is motivating us towards the production of a kind of equipment which allows us to produce a form of self-awareness, which animals aren't capable of having. It's the fact that we are animals in the first place that is moving us towards this higher level reasoning. But it's just this is just a terrible take. It seems to go against evolution, if anything.
It's just the parts are slowly working their way into place as you age.
Okay, so your position is language is one significant aspect, not the aspect differentiating animals and humans to where you'd be okay with holocausting one, not the other.
No, I'm sure there are other fundamentally different experiences that we have between animals and humans as well. Language is just the most sophisticated thing that we deploy, so it's one of the easiest.
I think that this is whatever you want it to be, Stephen. And I think that it's not that you care about language. It's not that you care about human consciousness, quote unquote. It's that you want to continue eating meat and you want to essentially create a structure of reasoning which represents your desires. And this is inductive. You've started with the conclusion. And you've sought to prove you're seeking the evidence to prove it. It's not that you're like, well, what's the difference between animals and humans which justifies me eating them, and what makes me feel different? Because as you say, this all boils down to how you feel. This is like axioms, or like what you take to be axioms, like presumptions, your own desires. You're like, how do I feel? Okay, I feel like this is okay and that's not okay. Why do I feel like that? And then you create an ad hoc reasoning to explain why you feel like that, because that's what it is. Why don't you just say, I don't care? Like, it would just save us so much time. It would just save us so much time if you just said, I don't care. No, abduction is, so I'll double check. I'm pretty sure deduction is reasoning from premise to conclusion necessarily. Induction is reasoning from conclusion to premises, and abduction is based on probabilistic reasoning. It's like, it is like, so from an inductive perspective, the conclusion does not necessarily follow from the premises. Deductive reasoning, general rule, specific conclusion, always true. Inductive reasoning, specific observation, general conclusion. Abductive reasoning, incomplete observations, best prediction, may be true. So induction is like constant conjunction, and abduction is based on, like, essentially it's not the same as it's essentially incomplete observations, but it's not the same as induction. It functions differently in terms of logical inference. I think the specific difference is that because really in terms, you're not actually assuming the conclusion first and then reasoning down. What the inductive reasoning is doing is looking at essentially a specific data set and then reasoning a conclusion which cannot be contained within that data set, essentially, or within those premises. So it's essentially there is no reason to say that there's no necessity that it follows. It's not to say that it's assumed, but it's assumed. Essentially, it's like it may be true. It might explain it. And I think that's basically what he's doing. He's like, this might explain how I feel. Where abduction, it would be like, this is the best possible explanation I can derive for how I feel. And for that, you need more than just personal introspection.
Easiest differences to see.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get this straight. So let's assume a 20-week-old fetus has consciousness, but does not have the capability to understand language. Why would you not be okay with killing a 20-week-old fetus?
What, I don't know if it has. I don't know how I would even determine if it has the ability to understand language. I'm not sure. Are you just saying like hypothetically, or?
It could be either one, but I mean,
what do you mean? Like, you can tell, like, there is, like, we have the exact same evidence to say that a dog can't understand language as a baby, right? Like you could make the same argument if you're just appealing to ignorance here. You could make the same argument that, well, I don't necessarily know my golden retriever isn't understanding the language, he's just not speaking it. It's just like, you know, they don't act and change their behavior in relation to the sort of linguistic scenario, to the syntax and the grammar that you're essentially giving them. They're not reacting and responding in such a way that behaviorally they are participants and recipients of the language. They're not linguistic. Like, to pretend that a baby might understand a language is it's disingenuous, if anything.
And like, you really think a fetus could understand language when even newborn children don't even have like phonemic differentiation? Like they can't even understand the difference between words and random noises.
Is that? I don't know if that's 100% true. I'm not sure.
That is. I think the ability to actually differentiate different sounds starts around 2 years old. And then that's when you can actually. I might be fudging up the timeline here. Might be like 1.5, but I might. That's when starts around. The ability to actually differentiate different sounds starts.
I don't think he means sounds. I think he means specific words. That's essentially like, we're talking about like, okay, now we've got the baby that's starting to understand words.
Around 2 years old.
It's like,
and then
usually
that's when you can actually.
It's usually 1 or 2. It's not specific sounds, because they can understand the difference between sounds, like in general, from birth. Like, that's a part of your natural faculties.
I might be fudging up the timeline here. Might be like 1.5, but
you're telling me a
sure.
1-year-old child can't differentiate between like different words and human voices, or?
So I'm sure
there's a difference between differentiating between the particular utterance of the word and between words. One is a specific particular case, and the other is a universal, right? Like, it is like, do you understand the difference between like mom and dad in their meaning? One is an understanding of the boundary conditions of the word, the grammatical use, the syntax in which they are being used. It essentially understands its relationship with other words in the sentence, and we're starting to see that a baby is acclimating grammar. And in the other case, what we are seeing as a child understands, can perceive the difference, can simply perceive the difference between the sound of mom and dad, you know.
I'm sure this is a growing skill, right? Sort of like. So, again, I haven't looked into this in a while, but so I might be fudging some of the numbers here, but yeah, like there is a point in time where you can say for certain a child at this age can have phonemic differentiation, and there's a point in time where you can say for certain it doesn't. And for newborn children, that's absolutely the case, that they don't have phonemic differentiation. For a 1-year-old, again, I might be fudging up the timelines here. Apparently, they still don't. They might have the ability to some degree, like they might be able to just recognize a familiar sound, like their mom's voice or something, but again, as far as I'm aware, they can't differentiate the difference between a cup slamming on a table and two people talking.
Until what age?
I don't know about that, but I mean, like, I think they wouldn't be able to tell you what they were. Like, as in, like, they wouldn't have the conceptual, like, the evaluation conceptually and know what each sound meant. They would be able to experience the difference, though, right? I would give Destiny a free subscription to my course if he wants one, 100%. If he wants to learn more philosophy, I will give Destiny a free access to my course, like, no problem.
I think it's I
Free
think it's
lifetime
two.
access or whatever.
But
okay,
in
hold
either
on. I'm not trying to
case-
like. This is just like. Were you telling me that, and I might be biased because I'm dad brained, but like this is like you coming up to me and telling me that like black people have an average dick length of 7 feet. That's how unimaginably wild that statement is. That up to 2 years old, a child can't like. I'm and again, I might just be biased at parent brain, but I'm pretty sure a 1-year-old child can start to understand sentences and stuff. I'm trying to remember. My kid, it wasn't until they were.
My girlfriend started to talk when she was like one and a half or something. Like, she just developed language really young. But it's like a symptom of autism if they develop language really young.
There's no way I waited until he was 2 to know the difference between two people talking and slamming a cup on a table. That's a wild statement. I feel like I'm going to make a bad faith accusation, and this is mean for you to do it, but I feel like you read somewhere that children have, a 2-year-old child has the intelligence of a dog, and you're trying really, really, really hard to make that stick. Because I cannot think of any world where somebody would say a 2-year-old child...
Even said, though, like, be decent with him, right? Because he did say, he's like, I'm probably fudging the numbers here, you know? So give the man a break. He said there is a definite point in which... And the point of what he's saying has nothing to do with the time scale. It's the fact that there is a time. So long as there is a time in which this is that a child cannot tell the difference between certain sounds and cannot distinguish the difference between certain sounds, so they're incapable of learning language, he's asking you why would it be justified to then not kill that child? Like,
That's when they first came
be better faith.
in the ability to distinguish the sounds of voices talking and a cup slamming on a table. That's just an unbelievable statement.
I was talking to somebody who actually majored in just like some sort of it was some sort of neurological science thing,
No.
and he
Richard,
specialized in children. And he was telling me there's actually
That is a bad way to start. Look, right, Richard, I don't doubt that you've had this conversation, but like, you know as well as I do, you can't trust anyone online about this shit, right? Like, I hear people talk philosophy all the time, and they are some of the most bullshit takes about philosophy that you'll ever hear. Like, you'll get people online who will be like, I'm a philosopher, and then they'll say something, and then you'll be like, oh dear God. Like, I mean, interpretation can vary for one, but like also like trusting whether they actually are even being sincere. Like, I study this, and it's like some people, like, it's weird, like people will just lie online. You can't really just trust that.
a certain age to where children can actually differentiate. Like, again, I might be misremembering, but this is kind of like
Sure. I would have to
It's
go
not
back
an important-
and I'd have to go back and
it's
look
not
it
an
up, but
important
my
point.
understanding is that babies can start to differentiate some words in the womb. That was my understanding.
I find that hard to believe, but
Differentiate some words. I don't know about that. I mean, I could imagine, like, it depends on what you mean differentiate some words. Like, do you mean that they could just like phonetically understand, like they can tell the difference between certain sounds? Like, I believe that would seem likely. It would be like based on pitch, and then like as the reason more and more in relation to the categories from which they are essentially outlining, they're essentially getting better and better at honing in on specific like sort of blocks, like frequency blocks, and then as the phonetics develop, they can essentially they can start to essentially understand the specific words, like where one word stops and one word ends. You know, what marks the sort of the not just like the tonality, but the ways in which words are said, maybe, but
And I don't. They literally have nothing else to do but sit there and develop and soak up whatever stimulus they get, right? Which is going to be sound and, I guess, moving around, and maybe hormones from the mom.
Yeah, like
start to react to sounds at 11 weeks.
phenomic, like according to you, you used, I can't remember what definition of language you used, but phonemic differentiation was one aspect.
Well, I don't know
Even
why you
if-
have such a hard time understanding this. Hold on. When I say language, I feel like you're really hung up on like the speaking part. I'm
I think that he's hung. I think it's the conceptualization part that he's hung up on, because you're saying that marks a phenomenological difference between animals and humans, which justifies treating one as a means to an end and one as an end to it in itself.
using
right?
language as a proxy for an incredibly sophisticated level of human thought not shared by any other animal on the planet.
But why should we? The whole point is, if you're saying that language is a proxy, you're actually saying that there's something about, unless you're saying that there's not something about language and it's only an indication, but then you just say why? Like, why is language so special? Like, what is it about language that gives the indication that this consciousness, this conscious experience is there? I mean, there could be a pea zombie, right? There could just be an automaton essentially acting in order to fulfill like a certain biological mechanism, and essentially like they're a sophisticated Turing machine, right? Like, what is it? It has to be about the mental process. Let's be frank. He's referencing the mental processes involved in language and conceptual formation, but we see that in other creatures. We see that in their behaviors and how they engage with one another, in the same way that we see with humans. So,
Like, the fact that we can use language means that we can have an observation about ourselves in the universe. It means that we can talk about
right. So he is referencing the phenomenological aspect of things, but it is at the point of language formation that we are starting to perceive those things, because this is birthed from a social relation. And essentially what we're talking about is like around 6 months plus, we start to see the development of a child's understanding of themselves in relation to or social relations, like in relation to their mother, in relation to their father. We start to see these things starting to form more and more, right? Like, essentially, like at the mirror stage, they have their relation to themselves, and animals have that. At the point of 6 months, they are at the mirror stage that the relation to themselves. After that point, they are starting to have a more sophisticated relationship with others. As they internalize those experiences more and more, then we can start moving towards more complex conceptualization. That's what we're talking about in language, right? We're talking about like a form of life, if you will. But animals have the same forms, sort of conceptual foundation as humans for a good while. Actually, it takes a little while for animals to be sort of outright overtaken. You can Alistair McIntyre's book, Dependent Rational Animals, guys, really great book.
about things in another time and place. It means that we can conceptualize things.
But animals, some animals can conceptualize of things not abstracts, like in the way that the infinites that humans can abstract to, which is a higher level of thinking altogether. But they can abstract time and place to a certain degree. Not themselves, but certain actions that can delay their responses. But what I think he's referencing is essentially to transpose one's identity to a time and place, to imagine to imagine themselves in a different scenario or having not done something. And that's quite higher order thinking. That's like not like, you're not having that at birth, mate. Like, not even close.
Things that don't exist. It means that I can communicate something that will happen at like a future time or we can only use language in the sophisticated manner we do because we can conceptualize all this.
No, quite the contrary. The reason that we can conceptualize this is like the chicken and the egg, mate. The reason that we can conceptualize this is because language as a tool allows us to conceptualize this. It's not that we have these concepts and then language forms from them. Like, as in the baby is having a temporal experience and imagining itself like 1,000 years in the future and shit like that. Like, the concepts that are necessary for that level of abstraction, the child does not have. You'd have to have some sort of innate idea that was incredibly sophisticated innate idea for that matter. There's no reason to say that they do. And there's a lot of more reasons to say that they don't. The children seem to have issues with time. You can see certain developmental disorders that impede people's relationship to these concepts of space and time, impede their relation, especially when it's tied to language. You tend to find that disorders that are tied to language seem to have, and sociality seem to have impact upon this. So like spatial awareness, temporal, understanding of like temporal, of like short-term and long-term sort of temporal relationships and stuff. Like, it's not just like, is your brain like a certain way? Like, it's like, have you had, like, are you having the experience necessary to essentially hit a certain criterion from which, once you engage with, now has a causative impact upon your psychology, where it's like the language itself is now having essentially now giving you the experience of transposing yourself. I mean, it depends on what you take the language as. If you take it as merely the social engagement, then this is what, like, essentially I think we're all talking about here. Like a point of mutual recognition, right? The point in which you conceptualize of otherness and you internalize that conceptualization and you recognize the other as essentially another you, and you're able to abstract your consciousness or paint your consciousness onto them to the degree that once you perceive from their position, you can perceive yourself from their position, and then that gives you the sort of objective conception of self, right? That is not something that you could have as a baby. There is too many. You'd already have to have the preconception of otherness. You'd have to have you'd have to have a sort of a conception of your own experiences to such a high level that you can then paint somebody else's experiences onto that experience to give you information about your experience. Like, this level of conceptualization is definitely not there when you're a baby. Like, no one is arguing for this level of higher order thinking in newborns.
The ability,
especially not in the womb,
to utilize language, that's like a proxy for all of these other things. I don't know when I know it's before 2 years old. I don't know when newborns develop like phonemic differentiation, but the fact that humans have the capability of deploying language that way, that type of thought process is unique to only humans.
Like, if you can't tell the differences, mate, between certain sounds, certain objects in your spatial awareness, do you really think that you could mark the boundary conditions of your consciousness to such a degree that you could transpose yourself through time and space to a possible, like a different possible form of experience? Like I don't know what to say. Like, except that's stupid.
That's what I'm using it as a
right.
Yeah.
Sure, I can grant that, but I think we can agree that there's certain stages of development where that isn't the case.
Sure, there might be, but but it's before 2 years old. I can't get over how wild that statement is.
Okay, well,
You're just locking down on the 2-year thing, mate. Like, actually engage with the topic. You're just running away.
You think that a 1-year-old child can't differentiate like sentences or words or commands? Like, it's for a 1-year-old child, is like a cup slamming on the table be the same as their mom or dad talking?
Just running away. Just running away.
I'm not an expert at this, so...
Have you never been around any children
really
ever in your life at any point? I don't mean that like insulting. I'm just
like
curious.
crazy.
Okay. That's fair.
I'm actually afraid of children.
Sure. Okay, and that's totally fair. My mom did daycare growing up, so I've been around like little kids like literally my entire life. So that's just, for me personally, that's just a really wild statement. It's hard for me to imagine that, but I can understand if you
Sure, but on the other side of this, like, if you're gonna rely on something like, well, I've been around kids and I can kind of pick up on how they feel and what they can like think. Well, I've been around quite a few animals, and
valid counter.
You kind of deny some of these ideas, like, you know, they're self-aware, they can, you know...
Animals certainly can differentiate certain sounds. You can have knowledge of that. they've also documented in terms of how the conceptual relation between how they understand words in relation to their experiences. Alistair McIntyre talks about this in terms of the training of a dog, what sit means and how that relates to various stimuli, how that the dog then compiles that word in relation to various events in their life as you train them more and more.
You know, see into the future, they have like certain feelings, and then you appeal to solipsism. Like, couldn't I just do that with children the same way you do that with animals? Like, I just...
I mean, I don't
if you're
think...
gonna make...
Can you give me evidence that a dog can know something that's not? Or, like, can you give me evidence that, like, a dog can know something at a future time and date?
Can you give me evidence that an infant can know something at a future time and date? Can you give me evidence that a future can that an infant can have a kind of actual? Like, why should we accept that an infant can know something at a future time and date, and that an infant could know a counterfactual whilst also the dog doesn't? There's no reason to say that they do have this capacity, the means of doing this.
Yes.
Okay.
Like...
But like the evidence is the same for both animals and humans. It's behavioral.
I mean, dogs anticipate things, so yes.
I mean, a dog can anticipate in a bunch of like incredibly basic if-then statements or Pavlovian responses.
Well, one, like that is like there is absolutely no reason to believe that humans couldn't be predictive engines. There is entire theories of consciousness based around the possibility that in fact something like ChatGPT is very close to human consciousness, just to a lesser degree. Like, it's like we could just be predictive engines. There's genuine theories about this. There's no like I'm not saying we are, but like why do you believe, like, you have to give the explanation as to why the human and especially the infant isn't also a predictive engine?
But like, I don't think I could communicate to a dog, hey, tomorrow we're gonna go to the park 1 hour later.
You can you communicate that to a baby? Like I'm sorry, this is absolutely wild. Like, I don't know why he thinks he can use this standard against Richard here when this is clearly this is clearly beyond the comprehensive abilities of a child, like of a newborn child.
Right.
But he's arguing from 24 weeks in terms of gestation. I mean, do you think that you can put a microphone to your pregnant lady's belly and explain to this child that they are going to the park when they come out? Like, come on, man. Like,
you might not be able to communicate that. I think
we're going to the
with
park.
a newborn baby, you wouldn't be able to communicate that either.
Probably not, but I think they have the conceptual capacity for those types of things. I think they're capable
Okay,
of
and
doing it.
why would you think that? Just because you have a feeling being around babies?
So what's he saying now? That, like, essentially it's not that they...
Probably not, but I think
born baby, you wouldn't be able to communicate that either.
Probably not, but I think they have the conceptual capacity for those types of things. I think they're capable of doing it.
Okay, and why would you think that? Just because you have a feeling being around babies?
Because babies, because I don't think there are, from my understanding, there's not substantial changes in the development of a brain past.
What are you talking about? What do you mean substantial changes in the development of a brain? Like, if we're talking about neurological density, there is a massive development from the infant, like through the infant's developmental stages, like massive, like tremendous development. We are talking about going from like thousands of neurons to hundreds of thousands to millions of neurons, from what I'm aware, right? Like, well, let's check, right? Like think I'm probably being a bit stingy with thousands. I'm pretty sure like a worm has thousands, but okay. So number of neurons in brain when fully developed. Okay. So this is like, okay. The process of neurogenesis is mostly active during the embryonic development and continues after birth for a year or two in humans. In the first stage of 42 embryonic days, neural progenitor cells, which are meiotic, are formed in the symmetrical fashion, which the mode cell division divides from the symmetrical to the asymmetrical. During the asymmetrical division, one neural progenitor and one neuron is produced. Neurogenesis mostly occurs in the ventricular zone, and newly formed progenitor neurons remain in the proliferative zone, while the neurons migrate radically out to the neural cortex. The cortical neurogenesis completes at about 108 embryonic days, a non-pathological process that is essentially in the establishment of the cortex networks. There are approximately of the developing of the brain involves a loss of about 50% of the neurons. There are about 100 billion neurons in the mature human brain. Initially occurring neural cell death occurs prenatally, and elimination of about 50% of unwanted connections among neurons occurs postnatally. Each neuron can make connections with 1,000 other neurons. Thus, an adult brain has approximately 60 trillion neuronal connections. So, from what I'm understanding, it goes to about 150. There's 100 billion neurons in the mature brain. Don't know how many of them specifically are there as you're a child. I'm assuming most of those neurons are there as a child, but the interconnections which allow for those neurons to essentially perform certain tasks aren't there, which is why it escalates to 60 trillion neural connections. So the pathways, so your neural pathways go from like maybe 100 billion to 60 trillion. Is that right? I mean, I'm not a scientist on this. Like, I am not a neuroscientist. That sounds about right. You're going from, I mean, it's still a very large number, but to an insane number of neurological connections, because it's amplified by over 1,000 per neuron by the connections that it's capable of forming in terms of brain plasticity. We don't make new nerve. So we don't make new nerve cells. So neural connections are more relevant in development. That sounds about right. That sounds about right. So it's like we have the same number of neurons, but we have a shit ton more neural connections. So like in terms of neural density, it's like neural density, neural connectivity is like massively increased.
I think it's a few months in utero. I'd have to go check, but I don't think a brain.
Destiny.
What?
Can I ask you a question?
In
the question, what you just said about the dog. So, if I communicated to my dog 1 hour later, like if I had a habit, like if my dog behaved different, my dog knows she will go out every day at 10 o'clock, right? Mm-hmm. And tomorrow, like there's a habit that we have after 10 o'clock that she will behave differently. Kind of knowing that she will go out an hour later. Would you count that as communication?
I think that you can get to there's like syntactic differences that you can build that appear to be sophisticated. Like it almost looks like a sophisticated intelligence. But
I mean, like, what do you mean appear? Like, why should we say that this is illusionary where the alternative is not? Like, based, one, for the fact that it's all behaviorally based in the first place, but two, that these are actually specific skills that you can teach your dog. These are like, you can teach your dog specific abilities, mental abilities to act and differentiate certain aspects of their experience, to understand whether it's spatially, temporally. You can do that even with fish, like with jellyfish. Not jellyfish, that's a bit much. With goldfish, you can teach him to ring a bell. My dog, he knows what bedtime means. If he's like, I can be like, He knows like when it's time to go to bed. He starts to get grumpy. I can say bedtime to him, and then he'll run to the bedroom. He knows what bedtime is. So like, it's not that he has a complex conceptual structure where I can go, oh, by the way, I'm reading your mind right now. Are you perceiving the same thing as me in terms of bedroom? Because that's not what we do with humans. We just look towards behavioral acclimation. Do they understand what I mean? Has their behavior changed in relation to what I'm saying? Obviously, there's a point in which that falls off a cliff. You know, I'd be like, Charlie, what do you think of Hegel's phenomenology of the spirit? You know, like, yeah, but
it's just like, it's basically a bunch of kind of like Pavlovian responses. So like, for instance, it might be possible to get a dog to ring a bell knowing that it'll bring somebody home quickly, but I don't think that the dog is conceptualizing, once I ring this bell, another person is going to hear it, and that's going to bring about them to do an action that's going to bring them, like, instead they're thinking ring bell, person shows up. So you can probably get,
if you're saying you think that they're thinking ring bell, person shows up, man, that's like basic conceptualization. Like, what you're saying is that they're not thinking like, if I ring this bell, then perhaps someone, like, you know, like, it's not like a form of like concept. They're not analyzing the situation. They're just performing the action because they believe they're acting in accordance with essentially a belief that it'll bring food. And they're right on that. Like, I don't understand, like, just because humans can abstractly reason why this means that one can be killed and one can't be.
like, relatively, like, I think with apes are really good at this. You can build these pretty sophisticated syntactic systems of if-then statements. If I do this, then this will happen. But I don't think they have the semantic conceptual awareness that humans do. And I think one piece of evidence of this is their total inability to deploy any type of language.
I mean, they can do sign language pretty well, but the con, like, they do have, like, we can say that they do have, like, essentially the prerequisites to language. They just don't have the complexity to engage in abstract reasoning.
But that's just my take on it. I could be wrong on that, but
All right, like, so your point that there aren't substantial differences in, like, the brain.
I just want to know why infants don't have this same problem, though. Like, they do. Like, it's not like infants have the capacity to use words, understand the conceptual differences. Like, have you ever seen a child understand at birth, like, conceptual, sort of the conceptual foundations of reality? Like, they will try to put a triangle through a circle hole, right? They're dumb as shit. Like, that they are dumb as fuck, man. Like, that. Not to say that they're not capable of learning. They have the capacities to develop, right? Which would be the neural connections in the brain, which they are developing over time, right? Everything goes through the circle hole. I suppose you're right, actually, because the largest volume. My God, I'm the idiot. Okay, I suppose just to give them big triangles, like, just to fuck with them. No, you're right, Shadow. You're right. That's me being a fucking idiot. Okay, they'll try and put the circle through the fucking triangle hole there. Okay, that's stupid as fuck, right? They are stupid as fuck, right? And apparently so am I. And like, they don't have the conceptual capability of actually understanding why it's not going through, right? Like, that's not something they have the capacity to develop at that age. They are developing the capacity in the action. Like, by observing it, they're actually starting to try and develop these structures, right? But they don't have them at birth.
After, I don't know, a child's born, I mean, they don't even have the ability to be self-aware until about, at least reflective self-awareness, between the ages of 15 and 18 months.
okay.
Like that. So I mean, I don't know if you did like a brain scan or something with the technology we have now.
Actually, wait a minute. I'm not being fucking thick, right? So if the volume of a circle, like, because it's surface area, isn't it? Can you fit everything through the circle hole? You can't you? Right? Like, because like the diameter, like as long as they're the same volume, but are the shapes? It's whether the shapes have been all made, like not the same volume, the same same circumference, if you will, right? Like it has to be like the circle has to be essentially like the diameter of the circle is the fuck. It should, right? Let's just square the circle, guys.
Might
We'll
not be able to
okay.
identify like substantive differences between a child's brain and an adult brain, but like that seems like a pretty fucking huge, like real world
cross-sectional area. That's it, isn't it? It's got to have as long as they have the same cross-sectional area. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So if the circle has the same cross-sectional area as a triangle, the triangle will go through. You can make the rectangle arbitrarily long. Yeah, I guess you can with the same area. You can, but that's not like, that's just, you're just fucking with the game then, right? Ping pong. But yeah, you're just referencing a hilarious video. Fuck you, man. I'm like, you've got me in Euclidean hell.
when it comes
Like I'm like a child now, just trying to put blocks together in my mind. Like you've taken us back
to your cognitive capacity, not even
This is like I'm actually disabled at this. Like I'm actually really disabled at this. Like one of the ways that you test dyspraxia is essentially like spatial awareness and like in terms of like geometric shapes. And if you put like if you like turn this shape into another shape or like essentially get these shapes to interact with each other in a certain way, like I can identify like if it's just basically geometry, I can do it. As soon as it's like and then it's easier when it's maths, but when it's like certain like especially when it's tangible. If you take it from like a 2-dimensional object and now you give me a 3-dimensional object and you go like turn this into a cube or something, I'll be like fuck. I'll be like, oh fuck. Like it's one of the ways that the kind of the test with dyspraxia and shit. I'm like, oh fuck.
even being able to recognize yourself in a mirror. Comes to your cognitive capacity, not even being able to recognize yourself in a mirror.
Yeah, but I don't know if like cognitive
child and
capacity
adult.
is necessarily the thing I'm looking at.
What the fuck is it that you're looking at, Destiny, right? Like let's be honest, right? Like let's be honest, right? It's not the actual, you're saying that it's something to do radically different about our experience of the world, right? But if it's not there, then what is it that you're looking for? The fact that they might experience it? Because then you could say that the zygote could have that, like it doesn't have the necessary connections in the brain yet, but neither does the newborn baby. Or we're talking about potentiality, or we're talking about actually being able to do it. Like I don't know. Like, is he saying that just in light of having the capacity to learn it, that it's valuable? But then why would we say that that indicates the actual experiential difference? Like, is there a reason to even say that it has the experiential difference? Yeah, I agree, Shadow. Infants and animals don't have abstract language. The identity, because they don't have abstract language. I completely agree, Shadow. Right? Maybe a few animals, as you say, maybe, right? Maybe. But like, I would agree. Infants and animals don't have it. So what is it that we're looking for?
When it comes to, because like some animals can display relatively intelligent or sophisticated behavior. Like I'm pretty sure dolphins can do like
dolphins in terms of their linguistic capabilities are insane. Actually, like if you look at what dolphins are capable of communicating, it's actually fairly surprising. Again, check out Alistair McIntyre's Dependent Rational Animals. It's actually really great.
Very sophisticated routines and learn like really large sets.
I think it's Dennett that talks about this as well. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that they have like the semantic understanding of the world that a human does.
It's not like, what do you mean by, you know what's it's hurting me more than anything? What does he mean by semantic understanding of the world? Right? Like someone needs to ask him, like, what do you mean by semantic understanding? Like just ask him, what does that mean? What does that entail?
Does, or the conscious like capacity. Yeah, it just shows that they're intelligent.
It appears that they do, and I know for larger whales, I think scientists are coming to a greater consensus that they do in fact have language, and they're able to communicate things like meet here an hour later, like semantic understandings.
Well, if
But,
that data emerges, that'd be interesting to see.
Well, sure, but I mean, like again, you're talking about things like language being the differentiating factor that
It's not, again, it's not
give somebody-
language. It's the capacity to use language implies sophisticated structures underneath.
Yeah, so I'm not saying
But the thing is that what you're talking about, like, then infants don't have the capacity to use language. They have the capacity to learn language. And like what we're talking about is essentially behavioral, like respond and reflect certain behavioral cues in order to acclimate certain what would be specific mental abilities. And animals have that as well, but they don't have it to the point in which a human will develop it, which allows for abstract thinking, like rational thinking, where you can start to talk about infinites, essentially, where you can sort of transpose away from circumstances. You can sort of take a qualitative feature of reality and expound it infinitely. You be like infinite space, infinite time, or like abstract a quality away from its circumstances infinitely, like the boundaries of the self in the eye, where it's like the self transposed through time, space, and through all the other categories, where you can imagine yourself in all other possible experiences, like all the possible worlds, if you will. Like that seems to be what marks the difference there.
saying if somebody can talk to me. I mean the ability to understand language. Clearly, a newborn infant child does not have that capacity, and it needs to develop that capacity.
Yes.
Okay, I'll go look that up more. My understanding is that newborns start to develop that like in utero. That like by the time they're a couple months old, I think they're already recognizing like distinct words and stuff. But I don't know, I could be wrong.
So what he thinks that newborns have language, like fully fledged linguistic capabilities.
Well, even if that's true, even if they have like phonemic differentiation, like dogs can recognize certain words. They can even understand certain.
It's about conceptual application. Like, how do we know that the individual is engaging with language and not just responding, and again even in a way that could be explained through a reflex, right?
Phrases.
Yeah,
like,
but there's no reason for me to think that
2-3
dogs
words in
have
combination.
the conceptual understanding because they never develop it.
Well, again, if you're going to use something like they will.
Well, you can based upon behavioral criterion, which allows you to essentially indicate that they are using and engaging with a certain concept. Which is, I think you're talking about Dennett there. Like Dennett, I think, does that with dolphins, right? Like where he's like, he talks about dolphins in this respect. I think that I know McIntyre talks about dolphins and he references someone else as well. I can't remember who, but essentially the idea is that you can recognize that they're making specific judgments upon specifically structured information conveyed from one party to the other, which can indicate how a school of fish are going to move, the position that they need to take, whether they should accept or reject that based upon their like the likelihood of actually gaining fish in the near future. And you can see the same sort of thing to a lesser degree in dogs and in basically all like to not all other animals, but pretty much all other animals to a various degree, like depending upon the conceptual development. Dolphins just being essentially we're closest cousins in that respect, right? So I don't know why, like, and as well, like, how do we know that the human's engaging with language? Like, that's what he really should be asking him. Like, ask him like how he knows that a human conceives, like has that semantic conception. You can't just say they tell me, because they mightn't have any experience at all. This could be a complex predictive engine. It's responding to you, but it's an automaton. How do you know that the human is not an automaton? Right? What gives you the indication? And if you say, oh, well, I don't know, I have to assume it because of behavior, or I have to assume it in order to understand myself, that same shit is going to apply to the animal as well. So that's where we should be taking this.
Develop it in the future, that means they don't have it now. And if you can change the outcome by, say, killing a child, like this is the same kind of issue that the people you were debating ran into, where they admitted to you, okay, like life, well, sentience does not begin at conception. It happens. I don't know if they agree with you.
We're not
the
talking
time
about
frame.
right now if you can use words. We're talking about if you've got like a conscious structure that is capable of like a semantic understanding of the world.
What do you mean by semantic understanding? No, man, we okay, drinking game. Everyone take a shot every time Destiny says semantic understanding.
Part of that semantic understanding of the world at one point allows you to deploy language. However, it might be that my assumption would be the semantic understanding of the world precedes the development of the faculty of language. So just because something can't use language yet doesn't mean I think it's having a markedly different experience. There's no reason for me to think that.
Okay, so now it's not language necessarily, but you're just using that as a proxy for other cognitive capabilities.
So you literally just restated what I said 10 minutes ago, and you're acting like you're the first one who said. So to be clear, I literally said earlier, language is a proxy for the semantic understanding humans have. Yes.
So you care about semantic understanding.
Okay.
Yeah, I get, or that's
okay. Vegan Gain said it there, so we're going to give that a half a shot.
That's what you fundamentally care about.
That's one big part that seems to set human sapience apart from conscious experience of animals. Yes.
Okay, and can you define to me semantic understanding?
All right, that's a full one. Clear? We're going to give that because two halves.
I don't know. The conscious awareness that humans have of the world seems to be, it seems to be markedly different from any other animal on the planet.
Okay, but how do we know that? Because they've got different semantic understanding. Because if you say that the reason we know their consciousness is different because they have, like, I mean, how the fuck do you know that? Like, anyway. Like, you have access to your consciousness and not theirs, so you have to base it off behavioral characteristics. But if you say semantic understanding is the underpinning of that, like their use of words, I'm gonna go fucking wild.
Okay,
like if somebody were to use the phrase,
a definition of semantic understanding.
Yeah, it is going to be circular, isn't it? It's definitely going to be circular.
If you want the actual definition of semantic understanding, I think semantic understanding is having the awareness of what something is like a sensation or qualia. Like a semantic understanding is if I say.
So wait a minute, a semantic understanding is consciousness, is conscious experience. So like he's just saying having a semantic understanding is conscious experience.
Like a dog is fuzzy. A dog is fuzzy or a dog is soft. Those are syntactic statements. Like a dog can have the property of that. But having the semantic understanding, the content of that, to know what it is like to feel something soft, to know what it is like for a thing.
That's not, look, right? Like that's like, you could have the experience of softness, like the qualia, and not have the word. Anyone playing this drinking game is on the floor now. I know I was like 7. Like it's like I've killed someone. Oh God, it's just semantic understanding, guys. No. So it just seems that like semantic understanding, what he's saying is just basically raw conscious experience, and that it is essentially, you know, when you say something like the dog is fuzzy. It can't be essentially the word itself or the use of the word itself, because we've agreed that's separate from the child actually having the capacity to use language. So it can't be that. So it's not just that it's actually the way in which semantics works. No, it's the content of the experience and the qualia. So he is just defining semantic understanding as as conscious experience, getting a semantic understanding of the flow.
To be like a thing.
Exactly.
That's like semantic understanding. So
you can't just use, right? You can't just use semantic understanding as a proxy, as like, I'm in consciousness. So it's like, wait, so what do you value? Consciousness? No, I value semantic understanding. And what's semantic understanding? Oh, well, it's consciousness.
Supposedly there's a difference between like a computer syntactically understanding something versus a conscious actually like semantically understanding something. I think. I could be wrong, but you can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I'm still not quite.
Like, the computer, I think what he's trying to say is there is a difference between, he's trying to mark the difference between the predictive engine, like something like ChatGPT, and someone's conscious experience. Right? But, and he's trying to do that by saying, because we have semantics, we have evidence that one has a conscious experience and one doesn't. But with the same evidence is, I mean, it's all behavior. It's all going to bottom out in behavior. So we have the same evidence that animals have that. It is a higher order theory of consciousness, yeah, Shadow. But I mean, you'd have to be able to give an explanation as to why semantics are creating qualitative experience. Because he's not saying that either. He can't be using a higher order theory of consciousness as well. Because if he was, then you'd have to be saying that the actual use, the actual semantic relation is producing, is the product of language, right? I think the language is essentially the explanation of that they are having this. And then, but what he's actually saying is that prior to this, there is the semantic content, which shows how the language is working. Like, I don't think he knows what he's talking about either. No.
Quite satisfied with that definition because I mean, like a dog can recognize if something's soft or hard or prickly.
Oh, well, then maybe for you, then it can be the same thing, I guess.
Well, you haven't really given me a
Maybe for you, like, now semantic understanding just means like maybe it depends on who you are.
definition
The definition depends on what you think, right?
of semantic understanding. You just gave me like a weird definition that would also fit like in an animal model.
Well, then you don't have to like my definition of semantic understanding. I'm not
it's
telling you
not
to use
really
it.
a definition. You just gave me an example. It wasn't a definition. And again,
when I said semantic understanding is like
animal model.
Semantic understanding is like having an experience where you understand what something is like. So like experiencing like a qualia. That would be like a semantic understanding.
But then you're just defining semantic understanding as consciousness, right? That's all you're doing. And then you're saying like, how do I know animals don't have consciousness? Because they don't have a semantic understanding. How do I know that? Because they don't have language. All right. What? It's like, one, how do you know that someone that you aren't engaging with a pea zombie anyway that doesn't have a semantic understanding, which is just pretending to be a human? It's a walking Turing machine. Or the infant not having the capacity for language. Why would that not be the same, the equal evidence that they aren't having the same experience? Why would essentially engaging in language be evidence of qualia? Because that's what he's saying right now, right? Like, like boil it down. It's what he's saying. If it engages in language, then I have the evidence that it is having a conscious experience. Why? Because it has semantic understanding. What is semantic understanding? It's conscious experience. So, semantic understanding is conscious experience. So how do I know it has conscious experience? Because it has conscious experience. How do I know that? Because it engages in language. And what is language? Do you know what I mean? Language is having conscious experience. Like, this is like, nah, man, this is a terrible display from Destiny right now. Awful display from Destiny right now.
Understanding.
So being able to experience a quality of something is a semantic understanding.
That seems to be a part of it, yes.
Okay, well, my dog knows if something's hard or soft, which is why he always tries to sleep on pillows. So...
I don't know if that's true. It might be. But if it is for you, then...
I am not a coherentist. I am most likely... I argue for hermeneutics. But if you're going to go those kind of terms, I'm probably closer to found herentism. Hound. So don't you come in here telling me I'm a coherent. I still think higher order theories are plausible. It's just not good enough for me to rule out the primitive theories of consciousness. I mean, I don't think they are plausible. I think that I don't think that they can account for. I don't think it's a very good account for consciousness, if I'm honest. But that's like from what I've engaged with, right? I haven't seen good enough reason to articulate that, and I still think that in terms of I think that the account that language is a development process in relation to a conscious being developing certain specific mental abilities in relation to social concepts it's forming through having the capacity to form them in relation to its own desires seems to be the most sort of the best evolutionary take anyway.
And go for it. Who cares?
I think the difference is if you could communicate it.
Well, no, that's not necessarily the difference.
Oh, that's not the difference, because then an infant wouldn't be able to do it, would they?
If a dog, so let's say I say a command to a dog. Most dogs understand the command because of the tone. The word could literally be different, but you can say the same exact thing in the same way that you taught the dog with conditional behavior, like with you know, what do you do to condition dogs? Condition them?
You can take him to the dog thing, yeah.
Well, I mean, what is called the way you classical conditioning. That's what I meant. You can classically condition a dog, but you could do a human too. But the human will be able to perceive and understand the difference between the two experiences that it's having. That the definition of which is only semantic. But a dog will never be able to communicate or show you that difference.
Okay.
So I mean that's the type of difference, or at least I don't know if that helps vegan gains understand what you're trying to say.
Well, he understands, but what he doesn't like is he doesn't feel like my definition of semantic.
Your definition's circular. That's the problem.
It
wasn't a
meaningfully,
definition.
yeah, whatever I'm saying. He feels like my explanation of semantic understanding doesn't satisfactorily differentiate human experience versus animal experience. So he really wants me to believe that animals have the same experience that humans do. But I think that all of the vegan arguments around animals have the same experience we do is just
I don't think that the second one specifically is going for the higher order theories of consciousness shadow. Because just because it tracks child development, like you seem to see the same with like for example, like take you could take a more primitive theory of consciousness and have the advent of language, it would still be causative. So child development would still have, like, the development of language to still have a causative impact upon the development of the child, and the better the conceptualized, the more they developed they would become, and that would be just as it would track it just as well, to be honest. And then from what I've seen, and then the fact that language integrates all parts of experience, like the sort of unity of apperception. If anything, I think that you would need the unity of apperception in order to engage in, like, and I think that the whole Kantian point is to say that the unity of apperception is to engage in a point of categorization that would be necessarily prior to your capacity to produce language. It's not that language unites your experiences. I think you could turn it on its head and say, actually, your experiences, the unity of your experiences are a necessary product to produce language.
A form of, like, intuition pumping and begging the question. You see an animal that's got eyes, it makes noises, and you think, wow, they must think of the world like humans do. But I've never in my life.
That with babies.
What?
You're literally doing that with babies. So
yeah, but I've got a far better reason to think a baby who has all the same parts in my brain as I do and doesn't significantly change as they're growing up is a lot more similar.
Well, they do significantly change as they're growing up. Like that's the thing. Like, newborn babies significantly behaviorally change, neurologically change. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, I think babies do change considerably. I don't know why you would say they don't. And I don't know why we're like, even if we ask ourselves, what is the like why are we attributing the qualitative aspects of our reality to a certain neural structure in the first place? Is it not because we've already assumed, in order to gain, that we've already assumed that a certain neural structure is indicative of consciousness? So I'm like, all right, in my head, I'm consciousness, and in the structures of my brain are like this, and then I attribute it to other people prior to engaging in neuroscience. Where I'm like, right, well, we're both conscious, right? And then you're like, yeah, but you could be a pea zombie. Like, it's kind of like there's no, like, this is the hard problem of consciousness. I think the only way to get out of it is the way that to get out of it is to realize that the way that you got into it is that you already presumed other individuals are conscious before, in order to create the sort of language game to essentially form this way of thinking, this form of argumentation. Which is why, like, I know Shadow, me and you were like having like this whole thing where I think that that you cannot assume that other minds exist. Where yours was to basically say, but what if hypothetically all of the necessary prerequisites were there, so that your own subjective reasoning was, you were mirrored, that everything just accidentally sort of lined up so that language formed. There's no way that you could know that it wasn't an accident. It would be irrational to assume that it was, like, it would be irrational, but there's no way you could know for definite that it wasn't. And we were like arguing about that. But in terms of like this, like, it seems to me that what he's relying upon is a kind of neuroscientific take from which he's already attributed consciousness to a structure of the brain, and then said that neural structure is conscious. The only reason he's done that is from a form of behavioral analysis in the first place. So he's went, people that, like, things that act this way are conscious. And I know they are conscious. Why? Because I am conscious.
Similar to my understanding of the world than a dog.
A baby doesn't significantly change growing up?
My understanding is correct, that there's not like different brain structures that emerge once a baby is born. Are there? Maybe there are, and I just didn't know that.
Well, the brain doesn't even fully develop until about the age of 25.
So when you say the brain doesn't fully develop,
I don't know what you mean by.
Yeah, no, I might be an idiot.
I don't even know what you mean by significant structural changes. Like.
Yeah.
What
well,
is,
I mean,
okay, if I were to put a pin.
Yeah.
If I were to put a pin through your brain. Okay. Yeah. It wouldn't change many structural things, would it? But like,
well, sure, so that's what I'm asking.
Could make you blind
so you can,
in one eye.
So you can help me.
Like,
so do babies not have like do babies not have a hippocampus?
He just means lobes, right? Like, what he's saying is just that there are like areas of the brain and like structures in the brain, where he means like these areas of the brain, like defined separate aspects of the brain from which perform specific autonomic functions at the point of birth. Like, yeah, is he saying that one of those automatic functions is consciousness, and that you can know that through language?
I understand what you mean.
Do
by
babies have like
changes.
a temporal lobe? I'm trying to figure out what part of the brain do you not have when you're 1 year old?
So do dogs.
Do they have a thalamus?
But, like, the point
do they have an amygdala?
So do dogs. The problem.
Do they? Okay, wait. But dogs don't ever.
There's so many problems you're making. Like, like, dude.
I mean, if he's gonna go this route, at least ask him. All right, what part of the brain is consciousness? Where is it? Show me. Like, put a brain scan on screen, right, and then just be like, point to the consciousness. Do you know? Do you know what I mean?
But if you're gonna say there's not many structural changes between, or structural differences between an infant's brain and an adult brain, I don't know what you mean by that, because again, if I drove a pin,
I can tell you, but
through
you
your
just
brain,
also keep screaming random shit.
That wouldn't cause many structural changes.
Yep.
But you could become blind in one eye. You could forget how to speak.
True.
Like.
Okay.
So I don't know what you mean by many differences.
Yeah, you
like,
keep screaming, I don't know what you mean, and then you keep
differences.
talking. I can just tell you what I mean. Do you want me to tell you what I mean, or do you want to keep grandstanding?
Please.
Okay. What I mean is all of the parts of the brain, the structures of the brain have developed. They might grow, but all the parts are there, and new parts don't grow. Like there's not like, you don't like develop your pineal gland at like 10 years old, or your like prefrontal cortex, that whole part doesn't just appear at age 5. That all the main structures and shit of the brain are in place by a few months, I think, in utero. That's my understanding. Am I wrong on that? Are there new parts of the
Don't understand why this matters. I don't know why any of this matters.
brain that grow when you turn 2?
Well, there are pretty substantive changes when you're talking about...
What does a substantive change mean? Can you explain that to me?
Okay, so, like, when you're talking about, say, 20 weeks of gestation, yes, so all the, like, parts of the brain are technically there, but,
Oh, I completely agree, Shadow. I doubt either of them have enough knowledge to have this conversation. Like, I don't have, like, I don't even, like, I don't know many philosophers or neuroscientists, respectively, that could cross this boundary, you know, between, like, philosophy and neuroscience on the point of consciousness to have a very good conversation in general. Like, let's be frank. Like, where we're coming to a point where it takes such specialized knowledge in both fields that we're talking about like a level of like neuroscientific philosophy, or like the philosophy of neuroscience and of consciousness, or like it'd be like no, it would be neuroscience and the philosophy of consciousness, like the philosophy of mind, irrespectively, like together, to have this discussion. Like, I don't know anyone actually for that matter. I don't think I know a single person, academically or otherwise, that could really have this conversation. Would you be willing to debate the Eastern view of the Trinity with me sometime? All my arguments are Saint Photius's Mystonology. Yeah, if you want to do that, that's fine. That's absolutely fine, Cyril. 100%. Like, just DM us and we'll set it up. But thank you for the donation as well. So yeah, like I don't know anyone, to be honest, that's even capable of this conversation to a high level. I mean, like, I think you know, like to the point in which you could genuinely say, like, I think to be honest, I think me and you both agree that in terms of the neuroscience, we have no idea where consciousness, like how consciousness forms. I think we both agree we have no idea neuroscientifically how consciousness forms. And in terms of the philosophy of mind, like, we have no idea how consciousness forms. I don't know what to say. It's just like fuck. So what we really look to is like, what am I taking to be conscious and not, and why, and that's where we're at really. Like when we have these conversations, and neither of them are going that route.
things like folds and wrinkles, like the size, like the just actual size and shape, are substantially different versus an infant.
The size
versus an
wait,
adult.
the shape is substantially different. What is your brain a cube when it comes out of the womb, or?
Okay, do you like? I think you understand what I mean by that.
What I think is that, like, so for instance, here's what I would say: your body, once you're born, is basically all there. You don't change.
Yeah, I have no idea that they assume consciousness from the cortex, but the thing is that even if they did, like I think Vegan Gains is assuming consciousness from the cortex. And actually, wait a minute, that's actually a really good point. Like, why wouldn't he just bring up like the fact that, like, why is he referencing 24 weeks if it's not in relation to the cortex? He's like, is he saying that the cortex is responsible? Because then you could start to point at animals, right? Like a cerebral cortex, right? We have the most developed, but then, you know, apparently it's not about development, is it? Like, as long as it's just having it. It's not about sophistication. Okay. Right.
change, you don't get new parts of your body as you grow up. They just get bigger and more developed. But once you're born, you've got all your fingers, all your toes, your knees, your dick or your vagina, like all the parts are there. Your gastrointestinal, all of the parts are there. You might grow and mature, but all the parts are there. You're a fully developed human.
Right, but I mean, you're literally smooth-brained at about 20 weeks. Like you don't think that's a substantive difference between?
My understanding is that is it the cerebellum that gets the wrinkles? What part of brain? What part of brain wrinkles? I don't remember. Oh, the cortex. I'm sorry. These things,
That's gonna be a bit of a problem now, isn't it, Destiny? Oh no! What part of the brain wrinkles? The cortex. That was not what he wanted from that Google result. Oh no, that is a big oopsie. That is a big one. Oh. Oh, excellent. I think that. Oh, this is the face of a man who realizes he's done fucked up, guys. Okay. I think as well, look, if we're gonna be honest, right? Why is he what would he even be willing to say it's the cortex? What is he come on.
things that develop. I'm pretty sure these come as
cerebrum.
Okay, cerebrum. These things develop as you gain.
Isn't your cerebrum just basically the entire upper part of your brain? I'm not even sure.
Intelligence, and you become more sophisticated cognitively, but it's not like those folds are a new structure of the brain. I don't believe.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, I don't know if that's the case.
Yeah, your cerebrum, cerebellum.
I mean, there's people who are smooth-brained as adults, and they're severely mentally disabled.
That might be the case.
But
cerebrum.
Again.
Yeah. Let's keep going.
I don't know. I'm still not understanding what you mean by. So, you just mean by.
I want to. Yeah, that's a good. Just what? If you would just say Terraria is such a based game. If you would just say what structure specifically causes consciousness, that would be great. I want to hear what part of the human brain, if removed, our consciousness disappears. Yeah, the cerebellum's below the cerebrum, right? And I think it's the cerebrum that's the part that wrinkles, and the cerebellum's that weird little nugget. But the I just want to know what's part of the brain that he's referencing here. If I remove it, if I take it out, where will the consciousness will go? Yeah, the nugget. Yes. Yes, the nugget. But the question is, Shadow, what nugget, if removed from the brain, will take the consciousness with it?
Substantive change, as long as the structure's there, technically, it's not a substantive change. So when the first few cells of the cortex, begin to form, that's not a substantive change versus when the brain's fully developed.
Well, it's not a structural change. There's a substantive change between a 10-year-old and a 20-year-old, but they haven't developed.
I just ask him where the consciousness is. Tell him to point on the get a map of the brain up and say where's the consciousness.
Okay. Okay, I think I understand what you mean there. I'm still not understanding what you mean by semantics, because again, you didn't give me a definition. You gave me an example, again, that would fit an animal model.
Unforgettable.
Oh, I need to get I'd blog or something.
Not,
So
the parts of the brain that we're talking
I'm
about.
doing a little bit. I'm doing a little bit of googling. Tell me if this is from vocabulary.com.
Wait, hold on. No. Wait. This conversation is never getting solved with a dictionary definition, okay? Because if it is the case that I lack what semantic understanding means so much, then you reading out a dictionary definition is not going to help me because I'm already lost in the
Well,
conversation.
it might, because you don't seem to be able to give me a definition. You can only give me examples.
Okay.
So, I just want to know what you mean by semantic understanding, and you can't give me a definition. You just keep giving me examples that would also fit in an animal model, but obviously...
Okay, you keep saying
this
fit in an
wouldn't
animal
apply
model.
to an animal
Wait.
model,
You keep saying,
so-
yeah, you keep trying to bring us back to an animal model while I'm trying to discern like stages of human development. This is the equivalent of what you're doing. I
Well,
say,
right,
wait, let me
because
just do
we're
one. I know you're
treating
let me do one
animals
example. Let me do one
differently.
quick example.
Yeah, but like the only way that like, oh god, the only reason he could say like if he says like basically a human brain, like all the parts of a human brain, you'd be like, why all the parts of a human brain in that specific order, you know, in that specific way.
Okay. So it's like there's an electric car and then there's a internal combustion engine car. And I'm telling you, the difference between an electric car and an internal combustion engine car is that the internal combustion engine car uses fossil fuel and the electric car uses a battery. And then you're going, okay, well, doesn't the internal combustion engine car have wheels? And I go, yeah. Okay, well, the electric car has wheels. Okay, sure.
okay,
But doesn't it have
that
car
has nothing
seats?
to
It's
do
like,
with this,
yeah, it
dude.
has car seats. But like, okay, well,
Yeah, but he's not saying that. He's asking where the semantic what's semantic understanding and how you know that one has it and the other doesn't, based off a structure of the brain that's not present in one but present in the other. So it's like, how do you know that like a dolphin doesn't have semantic understanding based upon the brain scan? And how do you know a human does based on the brain scan? Like,
doesn't it have like
nothing
a
to do
truck?
with
Doesn't it have the
this.
same shit? Yeah. Well, because you keep trying to
That
find.
analogy doesn't make any sense.
There are
Like, what I'm trying to
similarities.
point out here-
There are similarities between the human conscious experience and I imagine the experience of probably every single living thing on this planet, down to leaves, up to insects, up to primates. There's going to be similarities, right? More similarities with how you go up. But what I'm saying is, overall, the sophisticated conceptual understanding that humans have of themselves.
did he just say that a leaf was conscious? Did he just say a leaf was conscious?
Probably every single living thing on this planet, down to leaves, up to insects, up to primates. There's going to be similarities, right? More similarities with how you go. Hold on. There are similarities between the human conscious experience and I imagine the experience of probably every single living thing on this planet.
Did he did just say that a leaf was conscious?
Down to
I mean, we have absolutely like no reason to believe plants are conscious, right? Like no, like there's a very small amount of neuroscientists that think that plants are conscious. One of the main reasons is the lack of coordination within the plant. No, but even the whole plant, like the way that the plant coordinates with itself, like it just lacks the essentially what is a central nervous system. Which is why you would reference like a distributed consciousness. What does that even mean, Hound? What's a distributed consciousness? Like, if you mean consciousness in the same respect that like yeah, but why wouldn't a rock be a distributed like, if I don't, you're just trolling me if you're saying about the grass scream. Like, yeah, this is the thing is, I'm an idealist, right? I can get behind by saying it's a kind of consciousness, a petrified intelligence, but that's not the same thing as like a sentient, conscious, subjective experience, right? Mate, grass does not scream when it's cut. It has a chemical response when it's cut. It doesn't scream. Like, but they don't. No, like grass isn't like, by the way, there's a predator nearby. What you have is a process which has evolved in a species which allows coordination between reflexes in essentially a matting plant. We should breed grass that screams just stop. Grass shouts slurs when it's fuck. Oh, Oh, that's a doozy. I don't know why the grass is Scottish. Let's go.
Leaves up to insects, up to primates. There's going to be similarities, right? More similarities with how you go up. But what I'm saying is overall, the sophisticated conceptual understanding that humans have of themselves and the world seems to be incredibly unique to humans. That's my argument for why human sapiens is fundamentally different. Yeah. Okay.
Sure, and the differentiating factor here in particular is semantic understanding. I asked you for a definition of semantic understanding. You didn't give me a definition, and you chose to give me an example, which might have been good enough.
Okay.
But your example would also apply to animals, so that can't be useful in this discussion because you're trying to differentiate humans and animals. So either you need to use a better example or actually give me a solid definition. And
We'll go. Tell me what.
But what's worse is that, like, it's that he's assumed everything's conscious. He's just like, but the kind of consciousness matters. And what's the kind? The kind that you have qualia. What's a kind of consciousness that you don't have qualia? Like, what does that even mean? What does it mean to be conscious but not have qualia? Like, qualia is literally just content of your qualitative experience. Like, what does it even mean? Being awake of, like, you're not but if being awake is just being aware and you don't have qualia, so you're not aware of anything, how could you be awake?
Dictionary of concepts, and we'll go with that one, okay?
yeah, sure. So semantics is the study of meaning and language. It can be applied to entire texts or to single words. For example, destination and last stop technically mean the same thing, but students of semantics analyze their subtle shades of meaning. So being able to understand the difference between destination and last stop might have been a better example, but I think you'd have to agree that a 20-week-old fetus wouldn't be able to understand that semantic difference.
Possibly, yeah.
So you'd be in favor of aborting 20-week-old fetuses if they cannot understand that semantic difference?
Okay, let's try this. Why do you think the fetus wouldn't be able to understand it?
Why would I have any reason to believe it could? Like again, at that stage of gestation, they're smooth
Also,
brain.
hold on. The definition you just
Prove to me that the fetus doesn't understand language. Prove to me that the fucking dog doesn't, then, man. What reason do you have to believe that the semantic content of the fetus is not present?
just gave me was literally an example. So
Well, yes, but it's a better example, and I think it allows you to understand the idea behind semantics better than just saying the difference between hard and soft. Like you,
Well, I agree that they haven't experienced the world, not a developed meaning. Like, I mean, like, I think that meaning is a logical relation between words, right? Like we're talking about, like, and it's a stand-in for relations with people and events, right? Like of general principles that have been formed through, or like the conception of general principles that have been formed through reasoning in relation to your own experiences, like aspects of your experience, right? And other people's relation to your experience. Meaning is a logical relation between words. Like, no, I mean, semantics is a logical relation between words sounding. So, like, they haven't experienced the word in order to develop, like, essentially the semantic sort of boundary conditions between that allows for, like, specific individuated meanings. Like, I think that we could be, like, it depends on what we want to take meaning to be here. Like, do we just mean, like the thing that's being communicated, like, as in, or do we mean that the sort of limitations between of a communicable experience? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think what is being referenced here is, like, concepts, right? Like, are you having the experience of a certain limited thing, right, in terms of semantics, where it's like, this is separated out from other aspects of your existence, and that's been formed from essentially self-relating between experiences, where you can essentially start to pick apart and particularize aspects of a more holistic experience. I think that's what is being meant here. At least like in the chat, like when he says, like, they haven't experienced the world in order to develop meaning, it's like they haven't experienced the necessary amount of events and social interrelations that would allow them to relate certain logical conditions together to form limitations of their experiences to create like particular, to limit their experiences to particular stimuli. So where you'd go like, this is fuzzy while this is squishy or wet or something like that. Like, it's not that the experience or the meaning is entirely not present. It is, but it's not essentially limited to the point in which it's communicable.
Find it out. I think a dog knows the difference between hard and soft. That's why my dog always tries to sleep on pillows rather than the floor.
Okay.
Doesn't mean it understands the difference. It just knows it. It's just responding to a difference.
It associates like a rudimentary feeling to something.
Well, again, I would argue it understands the difference because you can see it adjusts its behavior in the future to where...
Let's see. We think you try to understand meaning by making a sound and hitting the child. Do it again 10 times. Make the sound and see how fast the baby flinches. But you can do that with an animal, so I don't think that that's what they're referencing. Like...
It will see a pillow, and it will see the floor, and it will go to the pillow. It doesn't just sit on the floor first, and then say, oh, that's hard. Let me try to sit in some other random spot. Oh, this is hard too. Oh, this is hard too. Oh, that's better. I'll just sit here. And then it just happens to be a pillow.
There's a difference between the binary recognition of this feels bad, this feels good, and the concepts of soft and hard. Like those.
Well, again, now
you're presuming a lot about how the dog comprehends these differences.
And Destiny isn't presuming how a 20-week-old fetus would think?
Well, I will, yeah. I'll presume a bit because we have identical parts, yeah.
Well, we share many similar brain structures.
Many, but remember what you said. Wait. Remember what you said earlier? Poking a needle through somebody's brain could make them blind. So why would I assume just because I share many structures with something that I'm going to have a similar?
But like, look, man, there are whole human beings that you don't. I know Wicked Supreme is just like I know I can't. I remember trying to have the conversation with him on like physicalism. That was painful. I was going through a bad time at the well, actually I wasn't. It was my girlfriend really going through like the bad time. Well, we both were, but like my girlfriend specifically, our gran had basically just passed, and it was awful. It was just like a rough time, but just trying to have a conversation like with him on bloody on physicalism was like impossible. Like on materialism was impossible.
Semantic understanding of the world, or similar conscious or sapient experience.
I don't know why you would look, man. Like, let's be frank. Like, if you're saying that you can put a needle through someone's brain and take out their eye, that doesn't mean that like there's no, unless you can point out a point of the brain which is relevant to conscious experience, you can't just go all of it. Like, unless you're going to say, like, all right, if there's a person that has a part of the brain removed, like, all right, someone gets a brain tumor removed, oh, they're not conscious anymore. Like, come on. Like, at what point, all right, if I remove, like, what part of the brain, if I remove it, means that you're not conscious? That's the question that should be asked.
Right?
Well, look, if you're going to compare yourself to a being that literally has a smooth brain versus a being that has folds in its brain, I could just as easily make the same criticism that you're assuming that, I don't know, a fetus or an infant or anybody is thinking the same way you think. Just like how you criticize me. Oh, well, you're just assuming.
Yeah, but we
the
have
dog
we
thinks
literally
this
have
way.
the same parts, so I can assume that we have the same emergent experience.
You don't have the same part. Okay, so if I found somebody who's an adult who is smooth-brained.
Wait, smooth. I don't know why you think wrinkles in a brain are the differentiating factor between our. That sounds like a cognitive impairment.
He's just pointing out, like, he's asking you, if anything, what's the differentiating factor that allows for consciousness, right? Like, this is there. That's it. That's the part right there. Like that's the part animals are missing. Like, come on, man. Like.
Not like a
saying. Yeah. So it is. You acknowledge.
Well, it does make a difference, but we can talk about it later. It's not important.
Again, like, if you're gonna accuse me of making, like,
Why is Wicked Supreme here, man? Like, why is Wicked Supreme here? Like, what's he going, like let's be frank, what's he going to add to this conversation?
Anthropomorphizing dogs because I'm just applying my own sensibilities to how the dog thinks. Like, I could make that exact same criticism the other way around.
What do you think?
No, like, before he goes like, oh, what do you think anthropomorphizing means? Like, it means literally humanizing. But the point he is making is you are essentially associating with another. So if you're associating yourself, when you say you are humanizing, like when you say you're anthropomorphizing, you're attributing characteristics from one set to the other. He's wondering why you can take the set which you assume your own consciousness and apply it to another being. Like that's what he's essentially doing.
Anthropomorphic means.
He's just going to get pedantic with it because he's just not going to be able to answer his questions.
Well, humanize.
Yeah, I don't have to humanize a human.
Well, you absolutely do in the case of a fetus because it does not have the same cognitive capability you do.
It's human.
Okay,
it might not have the same cognitive capability I do. Lots of people don't have the same cognitive capability I do. Like that doesn't make them not human.
Well, can you define what human is?
No, probably something relating to genetic sequence, I would guess.
Right, and I could find, I can find people who are literally like brain dead practically, who are completely mentally disabled, who have the same genetic makeup that, like,
yeah, they would be human. They would still be human. A persistent vegetative state, disabled person would still be human. Yeah.
Like again, I don't even know why I bothered arguing that point with you, but the criticism you're making of me that I'm humanizing how a dog thinks, you could use that in the other direction.
Sure, that's fair. And I would say that I got more evidence that a baby conceptualizes the world similar to me than you a dog because a baby and I have the exact same parts.
That is absolutely ridiculous because the foundation for how you'd explain why an adult human conceptualizes the world the same as you is going to be based off behavior. So like the evidence that you have that a human is going to conceptualize the world the same as you is going to be based off behavior, which you then attribute to the parts, which you then attribute to the child. So it's just a long way around of going, essentially, I'm associating cognitive responses to cognitive processes in the brain, which, you know, are essentially can be marked into certain like lobes, certain like what's the word I'm looking for? Well, structures in the brain, right? And so like it's all boiling down to behavior. Like in the end, it's boiling down to does this person respond? Does this person act like me? Do they act in accordance with what I would take to be the minimum requirements of having an experience? Why would I self-associate with that person? Like that's what it that's what it comes down to. Yeah, like it's painful. Like this is painful. It's like there is a point in which I will say 100%. I have absolutely more reason to believe that a dog is conscious than a newborn baby. Like from the same criterion, right? Like from the fact that they are engaging behaviorally with me, the fact that they will respond to stimuli, the fact that they can communicate and reflect certain conceptualizations in the world between each other in terms of social dynamics, in terms of decision-making processes, in the same way that it would be, you know, at an adult human I can see as happening, but I can't see happening in an infant. I will essentially say, well, it appears that the dog is more conscious than the baby. Like or more likely to be conscious than the baby.
Well, function in the exact same way.
It's just painful.
Well, not a fetus, and especially when you consider like just obvious cognitive differences, like an infant cannot recognize itself in a mirror, and I don't even think they have any kind of self-awareness until a few months into their development. So not just reflective self-awareness, like literally understanding that they're an individual doesn't even occur until a few months later. Like, you think that you can apply your own sort of cognitive reasoning and like think that an infant can use that same sort of cognitive reasoning when there are those massive differences?
I don't think I've ever used cognitive reasoning. I don't think I'm ever talking about cognitive.
Requires cognitive reasoning.
Okay, cognitive to me, and I could be wrong, cognitive to me sounds like prefrontal cortex, like intellectual developments. Like when I think of cognitive processes, I'm thinking of like reasoning and putting two and two together and stuff.
That's what's required for semantic understanding, which is what you told me is the difference.
These words, you know, like they're using words like cognitive reasoning and semantic understanding, and they sound so fancy, but I really don't think that they're actually relating to specific, like, why are you using these words? Do you know what I mean? Like, well, I actually mean the semantic. Like, I use words, right? And I can be an arse with this, right? But I use it because I've read these words in relation to like sort of academic text, and then I'll go and by this word, I mean this, right? And I know why they're using these words is Hegelian. I know it's hilarious, right? But I'll use these words because they're in relation to a tradition, right? I don't believe they've read these words anywhere. I don't believe that they are using these words. Yeah, cognitive means prefrontal cortex, right? Like, I don't believe that they're using these words because it's some sort of like academic terminology that they've picked up and they're just sort of forward in the academic discourse, right? Like, I don't believe that's what's happening. Like, I think they're using these words because they sound fancy. That's what I think. I think this is like, well, cognitive reasoning sounds fancier than reasoning. Like, it's like, well, opposed to what, like the non-cognitive reason? Are you making the distinction? Is it like, are you making like some sort of game where you're like, oh, like actually this is like whether they're cognitive or non-cognitive about it? Like, is this, or is it like, and I mean, I mean, maybe less in terms of vegan games with cognitive reason. I can understand why someone might say that, but like semantic understanding, and then that just turned out to be qualia or qualitative experience. It's like, why didn't you just say qualitative experience? It's optics. I do think it's optics. I really do.
Differentiating factor between human, animal.
Okay,
and I get it, right? Because like, look, like everyone, like, look, I'm not gonna lie, like everyone in this cares about optics, right? Like I'm sat here right now. I care about optics. I'd be a fucking liar if I said I didn't care about optics. I'd have to have no personal investment in my own appearance, which, you know, I try my best to divorce myself away from, like I do, but it's fucking hard, right? Like if like being like genuinely like to the point in which you are like just totally immune to how people perceive you would be like really difficult. But I feel like I think that a lot of this, it's like blown up to a higher degree, right? Where it's like it's using terminology to hide the meaning rather than relate to something that they might be used to saying or used to engaging with. Like, I know like a lot of analytic philosophers will use terms I don't understand, but they're doing it not because they're trying to confuse us, but because they're used to using those terms. I'll use terms in terms of Hegelian philosophy. So neuroscientists might use terms I don't understand, and various other academics will use that language I don't understand. But I don't think that this is like a continuation of a discourse that they've already had. I feel like this is the proliferation of a cool sounding word game used to win over an audience. But I might be being a bit harsh. I might be.
I didn't know. Yeah, and I'm just uneducated about it. I didn't know that. I don't think I'm unaware that cognitive understanding is like necessary for putting together like just like having a conscious experience of the world, or we're conceptualizing different ways.
I don't think it's all behavior here. I'm conscious. My consciousness is due to my brain somewhere. The degree in which something has a similar brain to degree which is probable. They also have consciousness. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that there is a point in which you can say behaviorally in relation to the structures of the brain, that you can see that if you from a behavior, you can then extrapolate and say it's very probable that a central nervous system is tied to something like conscious experience or conceptual or like some sort of conceptual capacities, right? Like you could say that because you could like, right, do they have the ability to use to have like certain mental abilities to differentiate the world, to you know, problem solve whatever, based around like a sort of behavioral analysis. You analyze that behavior, like, yes, that behavior indicates to me that they likely have an internal experience which includes a kind of conceptual formation which could then be used to social gain, for behavioral for environmental analysis, whatever it may be, problem solving, whatever, right? And you'd be like, okay, right, like I'm will, and then you could basically scan various other creatures. Like you can go all the way down where you go like, okay, this creature seems to lack that behavior or the capacity to perform that behavior based on the experiments that we've done, which would essentially make it beneficial to perform that behavior. They seem to be unable to be taught that behavior. They seem to be able to not be able to basically everything with a similar level of brain structure seems to also lack that behavior. So, you know, that behavior seems to be not apparent or like I cannot infer that specific mental object or that specific mental ability to that level of neurological development. That I have no real problem with, Shadow. Right? I'm not going to lie, I'm real got a problem with that. Because if you do that, what you're going to find is that you have the exact same reason to assume that the development of a human brain versus the development of a dog are essentially going to have a certain level of consciousness or have a certain... We have the same reasons to assume that they are conscious based on the material conditions, right? Because we're like, okay, an adult human has the behavioral prerequisites from which I would say has not just... conscious experience, I think, is a very minimal mental ability anyway. Like, I think that when we talk about it, what we're talking about is having like we're talking about the differences between reflexes and reactions. A lot of the time, not even reflexes and reactions, but rather reactions and cognition, right? That we would see in a human, where we would say like, okay, like is there a level of processing here that indicates that they aren't just responding to stimuli, but essentially thinking, right? And that's going to be based on some form of behavioral analysis, the same way we do for a human, where we can say the difference between a reflex and a cognition is like whether it hits the brain, is it just dink, it reflexes, or did it go to the central nervous system, like the brain? We'll see that in animals as well, right? So we can say like, all right, there's a difference between this reflex and there is a different reaction, and this like sort of what seems to be a cognitive process, or like is likely a cognitive process, right? That seems to happen in animals as well. So, and to like really all the way down, it's when we start talking about like conceptual, like for example, dogs perceiving object relations. They struggle with things like that. So like when they're tethered to a lead, not walking in between a lamppost because they understand that the lead, like the sort of the tethered and what that means in relation to the lamppost. They might be able to be taught it, but they might not. Some dogs can't, right? You might say, and then you might say like, well, cats seem to struggle with other concepts, and some animals may pick up concepts faster than others because it's evolutionarily advantageous, and they seem to do that, and they have certain structures of the brain which relate to those, and you can see that this is kind of how brains are forming in relation to what's advantageous, what's not advantageous, in relation to the sort of a being's conscious experience of the world and attempts to essentially proliferate itself. Like, is it capable? Is a certain level of experience, a certain kind of experience or conceptual awareness, allowing them to survive in terms of push and pull factors and evolution. And then we see that those areas seem to be more prevalent in certain creatures because of the ways in which they would need to act and behave in the world, which means that we'd see that certain concepts are related to those creatures. And then when we get to the point of language, we can see that like this opens up the conceptual game wildly, where we can essentially form like a huge variety of different structures based upon purely intersubjective stimuli, right? Fair enough, right? I have absolutely no problem with any of that. That seems to be absolutely fine. There's no problem with that. None of that relates to consciousness. There's no reason to think that animals couldn't be conscious based off that kind of analysis. But when we're talking about what he's talking about, which is like, there is a certain part of the brain, or rather the reason I have to believe that humans are conscious is essentially that their brains are structured like mine. But let's be honest, he's already attributed consciousness to them, which is why he even associates like neural structure with consciousness in the first place. Like he's self-associated and then abstracted that to animals. It's like if we started neuroscience again, right? Or like philosophy, philosophy of mind and consciousness, and like sort of neuroscience again, and we were just to go, okay, if we just assume we're conscious, what else could we assume was conscious? We go, well, maybe humans. Okay, fair enough. And we didn't do anything else from that point, and we stopped. That's where I think destiny is.
You don't need semantic understanding to have conscious experiences, but what you're telling me is that you care about semantic understanding.
Uh, yeah, but like, look at the argument you gave. Like when you say that on 2, my consciousness is somewhere due to my brain. Like you'd have to defend premise 2, right? And the reason I'm saying that you're going to do that is you're going to say it's something to do with my brain because other members of my species are conscious. Otherwise, you wouldn't be associating consciousness with your species, and you wouldn't, and the certain biological characteristics of your species. Like you're essentially associating yourself with others. So it is a behavioral argument in the end.
And I think it's pretty clear that a 20-week-old fetus does not have semantic understanding. Like, again, can you give me any evidence that a fetus would know the difference between a destination and a last stop?
No, but if it doesn't, it's not because it lacks the capability of the process to know that. It hasn't actually gathered the physical experience to know that.
So can you give me any evidence that a 20-week-old fetus could understand the difference between a destination and a last stop?
No.
Okay, so
well, hang on. In this case, sorry, you do have the evidence that you cited earlier was that the fetus doesn't grow to grow new parts. It has the same parts it will have.
I mean, I couldn't give you evidence that like a child in a poor African village would know the difference between a destination and a last stop because they might have never left their village before. Then they don't use those words. So I don't feel like it's a good question to figure out. Like,
oh come on, right? Like what's being asked here is whether they have the capacity to even learn it. Like if we're talking about just having the neural structure, like necessary to eventually develop these functions, like maybe, but what he's asking is like what he really is asking is where's the consciousness in the brain, right? Like that's what you just like, it's what he just needs to bring it down to like where's the consciousness and why are we associating it only with human brains? Why can't we associate it with mammalian brains? Why can't we associate it with brains which are relatively similar? It's like even if we were to argue that we have the most evidence to assume humans are conscious, which very well, I'm happy. Even if you were to say like we have the most evidence, why? What is that evidence? What is it that essentially allows me to associate human consciousness or like consciousness with a human brain so readily to the point in which I can then associate it with an infant, which lacks all of the same. Well, not all of the same, but lacks a huge amount of development compared to an adult, and seems to go through a massive psychological development as an infant. I just don't, and what's worse is that this doesn't seem to even comport to neuropsychology, right? Like, it's not that as if neuropsychologists are like out here going, well, only humans are conscious, right? Like if we're gonna go down the line, like what gives destiny? It's even like what gives destiny the knowledge to actually even say I have a solid neuropsychological take. Because right now, I don't think he has a solid neuropsychological take. Show me on the doll where the consciousness touched you. Exactly, that's it.
If we're going to use these really flimsy arguments, like, oh well, it has like the same general brain structure that we do.
No. Babies don't have the same general brain structure. They have the exact same brain structure. All the same parts. They communicate in the same.
But there's people who don't even have the same. Like if you had just ask them if someone has a brain was it a lobectomy or whatever it's called. Do they just stop being conscious? Like, oh, they just took a part of your brain. Guess we can kill you now. Like,
same ways.
No, they don't.
Okay.
Okay, so you're telling me if I took a 20-week-old fetus's brain and I took your brain, it would have the exact same structure?
That's my understanding. My understanding is
Really?
20 to 20 weeks, they have the same structure.
Could you go on screen right now on your stream, Google 20-week-old fetal brain, and Google adult human brain, and then tell me on stream to all your viewers you don't see a difference? Like it's just so visually apparent. I don't even know why you're saying this.
When do last structures of brain develop in fetus?
Not in
end of the
fetus.
Trimester, Gaither says the fetal.
That's not like the last structures of brain in fetus. Like, what is he saying? That they are structurally identical in terms of their being fully developed. Like what he's saying is that if you take a 24-month-old fetus, does it have all of the same? Like, and what he says structures as well. Like the problem is that I think they're talking past each other here. Like one means the simply having the like certain neurons in place, and the other is talking about having the neural connections of a fully formed human brain. Yeah, Destiny's position isn't that animals aren't conscious. His position is that they don't have the kind of consciousness that is valuable. But I mean that's even worse, right? Because like the way that he even differentiates consciousness is to say that one has consciousness, but the other has semantic understandings, and by semantic understandings he only means qualia, and which really begs the question: what does it mean to have a conscious experience that is non-qualitative, non-experiential? Like, what does that even mean? So like, what I think is the more mind-bending take from all of this is that Destiny seems to believe that you can have a conscious experience of nothing. Like,
fetal brain looks structurally much like the adult brain, with the brainstem almost entirely developed.
No,
So at
no,
7 weeks, the
look
rudimentary
at
brain
images.
separates into 3
Look at
distinct parts:
images.
front brain, midbrain, and hindbrain. For the first trimester, neurons and synapses begin to develop in the spinal cord. Second trimester, the brain takes control of
Look
bodily
at
functions.
images.
Why do I want to look at
Please
image? Wait,
look at image.
You're literally giving me the.
You said it's structurally the same.
Yes.
Exactly the same. So go to the image section of Google, bring up fetal brain, 20 weeks gestation, and then bring up adult brain, and tell me there's no structural differences.
I don't know if I can identify a
Right,
structural
this is
difference.
getting embarrassing, right?
How big are those
Wait, wait,
structural
wait, wait.
differences
Hold on,
between
wait,
a fetal
okay.
brain and an ant's brain, though?
Wait, hold on, because now I know I've won the argument, because this is kind of so ridiculous. I don't know if I can look at a brain and tell by looking at it the structural differences. First of all, if I'm looking at the brain, I can only see the outside of the brain. I can't cut it and see through, like, even the different. And also, I don't even know if I would
Open
know
up
the
image. I see what you're looking at. Open up the image.
Okay.
Open it up on stream, the one on the top right.
Okay.
You don't see a difference here? It says 20 weeks gestation, and it shows, what is it, 9 months or something? Or okay, so we have 22 weeks, and then we have 37. Go back. 22 weeks, 37 weeks. That one was perfect. So tell me if you don't see a structural difference.
Which one?
It was the gray. It was all gray, I think. That the other one that's colored is fine too. But again, just anything.
Okay,
that gives
we're
you a
looking at this.
visual.
Here we go. Okay, so can you tell me at, we'll say at 100 days, like what structure is at 9 months that's not at 100 days? Since you can look at it and see it, can you please tell me?
Sorry, you said that it's structurally identical.
Yep, and you're
or the
laughing and you're
same.
saying they're not. So I'm going to keep asking this question. You'll leave the
Okay.
Discord, by the way. So tell me at 100 days, what structure is not here that's here at 9 months? I'm going to
I'm
ask
not
the same
saying.
question. Yep.
Okay, look, I'm not saying that a structure is either missing or.
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to ask again. What structure
So
is here at
you're
9
the one
months
who
that's not
said-
here at 100 days? Because I said they were structurally identical. You said look
Okay,
at the
if I
picture
were
and you
to
laugh.
find-
So I'm asking you.
hey, what are you after? Okay. Right, we're gonna have to hurry
What
this up
structure is here?
because I think my dog wants out.
9 months, it's not here at 100 days. Let me
Okay,
know.
Destiny.
Yep.
Well, a dog has all those same structures as a human.
Really?
They're just different. So
Okay,
can
that's cool, but I want you to tell me what
can I
structure is
say
present at
dogs
9
have
months
semantic
that's not here at
understanding?
100 days. I'm waiting for you to tell me because we looked at the pictures and now we see the pictures
Okay,
and I realized that's so now I want you
Destiny.
to tell me what structure is present at 9 months that's not present at 100
Destiny,
days. You
a
opened the
dog
picture
has a
and you
cerebral
laughed and you
cortex,
said,
a
"Oh my
dog has a
god,
hypothalamus."
obviously the structure is different." So tell me what structure is there at 9 months that's not here at 100 days. You wanted to look at the pictures and now we're looking at it. So tell me, we're looking at the picture.
Destiny, we share an evolutionary history with all animals on the planet.
We
A
share an
dog
evolutionary
has a
history with
cerebral con-
cockroaches.
Yes.
I
a
don't care about
dog
evolutionary
has-
history. I don't have
Okay,
an evolutionary
dude,
history
dog
with a
has
child or a
cerebral
parent. We're the
cortex,
same
a dog
species.
has a
We're the-
hypothalamus,
That's
a
not what we're
dog has all
asking.
these same
Right now, what we're
basic
trying to figure out is
structures.
what
That
is
is very
present.
different.
What structure is present at 9
You
months
have-
that's not present at
I'm
100
not
days?
saying
I mean, to be fair, I really think that Vegan Gains has a point here as well, because like I'm actually just looking into it, like essentially what are the differences in a dog's brain compared to our brain, and it seems that really it's more folds, I mean, a larger surface area, and that our brains are more developed, so it's not like it is literally just like number of neurons and connections. So it's that we have I mean, I don't know enough about this to even really reference this. What I do know is that it's pretty much neuroscientific consensus to assume animals are conscious, man. Let's see. I think one of the reasons that we even do testing on dogs in terms of like we test like loads of like neuromedication on dogs because of the similarities between our brains. Where like we'll do like Jack Russells and stuff. Yeah, it's just that we have a greater brain to body ratio. We have a more developed cortex. It's a large amount of our brain, and yeah, that seems to be the case. So this is pretty bad though for Destiny's position, because all of the same, like, because now we're talking like if we just talk about like if it's just neural density, like there's a what is it, a 24-week there's a 24-week a 24-week-old fetus have the same density as a fully grown dog. But again, like I don't know why, like this whole, like I just don't know why you would even try and make out like it's a specific part of your brain. Like what part? Like, you just need to ask them like what part of the brain, if removed, would lead to consciousness not being there anyway.
There isn't a structure that isn't present.
Oh, so they're structurally identical then. There's just a difference in like growth and development.
The image is on screen, dude. Do you really like?
I see the image on screen, so tell me. No, I'm just asking. So what's present at 9 months that's not here at 100 days?
This isn't working. Everybody can see the image on screen.
We all see
it
the
is
picture,
visually
so interpret
apparent
for
the
us.
structures are different.
Oh, so now the structures are different. So what structure is here at 9 months that's not here at 100 days?
I'm not okay. Do you understand that there's a difference between saying that there is a structure missing and
Just ask him what he means by structure.
that these structures are different?
How are the structures different?
Okay, Destiny, do you lack semantic understanding? Should I be able to Holocaust you?
Just look at
Because
the
I
pictures.
just
The pictures are here. I need to explain the pictures. Tell
I
me what's different.
literally just I think Destiny lacks semantic understanding because I just spelt it out for him and he still doesn't understand. Maybe it should be okay to like kill him, according to Destiny's logic. But this isn't working.
The reason
images are on
the
screen.
reason he's
You
bringing
can't
up the
fuck
fact that the
with me.
structures aren't different is because humans do learn language eventually, and if there's no new structures and they're able to do that, then
So-
that he is presuming that
But if we're assuming it's if we're assuming it's structural and the dog has the same structure and they don't ever learn language, that is evidence against his position. So if he's making the argument that dogs aren't conscious because they lack quote unquote semantic understanding, which is evidenced by language, and because of the development of language, it's basically saying that the development of language indicates conscious experience, right? Which is absolutely bullshit. But like, if we were to say that, or like, anyway, as it bombs out in behavior, but if we were to say that that was the case, like if we're assuming that's the case, and that's why he's saying like, look, and as evidence of this, a dog lacks the parts of the brain that a human has, which allows for consciousness. But if a dog has all of those parts of the brain, right, this undermines his whole point. Like, this undermines everything that Destiny said. Because if a dog has all of the necessary component features that would be there to have semantic understanding, and he was resting on the fact that there are these fundamental differences between dogs and humans which don't exist, then if he's to affirm that that dogs lack semantic understanding, it can't be due to lacking a certain structure.
a 20-week-old fetus would have this capability. It just lacks the experience so far. Whereas a dog has the same structures but never learns this capability.
You know that it's like he comes in, like it's like Wicked Supreme comes in with absolutely nothing valuable to say. Like, so what you don't understand is that dogs don't learn language, but humans do. And so that means that the conscious that when we affirm that a human's cranial or like neurological structure is the cause of consciousness, that it means that they will that something about that structure means they necessarily is necessarily tied to language. Oh yeah, but dogs have that too, right? Like, you know, no, what you don't understand is dogs don't learn language. But yeah, but dogs have the same cranial like neurological structure, right? Like, it's like you're an idiot, man. You're an idiot. Stop it. Like, I'm sorry to say, like, you're missing the full, like, I don't mean to be, like, harsh, but, like, just understand the argument. If he is trying to say that there is something about the structures of the brain which are relating to the fact that you can learn language, and the fact that they do learn language means that these structures of the brain are indicative of the capacity to learn language, then you're actually just affirming that a dog would have the capacity to learn language. If you're saying it's evident that a dog does not have the capacity to learn language, then what you're presenting is a counterfactual to Destiny's argument. Think about it, man.
Right, so
Like, you're basically, you got a picture of like a big
okay,
circle and a small circle,
wait,
and you're
wait.
like, you really think these are both circles? This one is so
Okay.
much bigger. Like,
wait, if we're gonna go down this route, all those structures, I'm pretty sure all of those brain structures are actually there at about 12 weeks gestation.
can you, here,
which
actually, wait, I'm
is-
curious. I got one quick question. On screen, are these both the same structure or different structures? Can you tell me?
Give me a second. The stream's like a few seconds
Yeah, that's
behind.
fine. I'm just curious if you consider these the same structure or different structure.
Well, they're both circles, but they are different. Like,
So
I
when
mean,
you say structurally, these two things are different?
okay, Destiny, if I were to show you two different apartment buildings and they all have, I don't know, like, whatever fucking structures are in a building,
I'm just
vibration
curious. I'm just
dampeners,
curious
a
structurally. Are
foundation,
these two things
are
different?
they
That's
the
what I want to
same?
know. I just want to know structurally if these are two different things.
Destiny, you lost the stupid, like, there's a reason why I told you to show the image on screen, and you tried to avoid doing that, and you knew it would make you look bad.
Firstly,
and you
I
avoided
didn't avoid doing it. I literally
So
Googled it. This is the same argument
you
pro-lifers
avoided
use when they
doing
say,
it
look at what the
first
fetus
because
looks
you
like.
knew where this was going. Okay, so yes,
If I avoided doing it, why would I look it up on stream at all? There you go. Good. They're structurally identical.
Okay,
Good
buddy,
job.
I don't even think you're like, I don't even think you're sycophantic weirdos who like just gobble at your cock all day think this is smart of you. Okay, so if you're gonna say that, oh well, all the structures are there, they're very f***ing different, clearly, as we've seen on screen.
He
but
does have a lot of people who do just suck his dick on stream. Like, that is a genuine, like, don't get me wrong, right? DGG has like a lot of you are cool as fuck. I think these are cool guys. Spoke to a lot of the philosophy bros. I actually need to get back to Duke. Guys, remind us to get back to Duke. I keep meaning to get back to Duke. Okay, I'm actually going to get back to Duke after this stream. That's just like totally reminded us. Okay. But ask us next time, have I gotten back to Duke? Okay. So, I'll actually review his video tomorrow as well. But anyway, like, but it's just one of those things where like, there's so many people in the DGG community that are just, they're just there to suck his dick, and they know it, right? I'm not. I'd sort of appealing to the DGGs. They're not good people, and they know it, right? I'm not appealing to them, man. Like, half of them fucking hate us ever since the whole ContraPoints thing. Like, it's I don't really give a fuck. But there are good people. Like, I know enough of them to like enough of them to not denounce them as a community, right? Like, I don't want to do that because I know there is at least the philosophy bros, right, who are in the DGG community that I will stand, where I'm like, no, there's a lot of good lads in there, right? There's people who I think give us advice. I don't know if it was like the D&D community, but there's like a few communities that on there I've been in, and the sound. But then there's the general, like, it's like on his Discord. It's like the general part of his Discord. No, sorry. Like, I'm not saying they're bad, right? But like, a lot of them are just there to like I was, oh my god, my director. You know what I mean? Like, Vorsh was a DGG. Like, that's it. Yeah. I don't know why. If I guess I'm just so not gay that I try and put a cock in my mouth and it comes out the other side of my cheek. It's gonna be that. I don't know if I should have said that on stream. Like, anyway, we're gonna move on.
because they're there, we
can just assume that, that being has semantic understanding. Okay, well, why don't you assume that a fetus at 12 weeks gestation has semantic understanding? Because
my understanding is at 12
structures
weeks,
are actually there.
I don't believe that's the case. My understanding
well,
is that
they are actually there. The actual cells, they're very different shaped, but the actual cells are actually being developed. All
they're
in those
being
locations.
developed, but the parts of the brain that are necessary to have a conscious experience are not fully formed, and they're not capable of communicating with each other.
Oh,
yet.
not fully.
But why do you? What about the conscious, like the points of the conscious experience? Like why? Like why do you even associate that with them?
Formed. So now you're recognizing that they need to be fully formed, and there needs to be certain.
No, that is
structures
actually
around-
that is like I wish you wouldn't put the whiny voice on. But yes, Richard, you are right. Like that is a bar. Like he's just made a very big slip there.
in a certain way.
Vegan,
it's almost as if now you've gained the ability
Hold
of
on.
semantic understanding.
Do you think a 9-year-old is fully formed?
No, and I.
Okay.
So
all right, okay.
again, Destiny.
No, but he's saying that if you think that there's certain things that aren't fully formed for one process and not another, like why is it that you're saying that the infant has conscious experience, or rather that the fetus at 24 weeks has conscious experience, while the dog does not, even though it has the same structural prerequisites, but and even a higher degree of development. Like,
Yeah, good.
You were telling me before that there is no structural difference between a 20-week-old fetus and an adult human in terms of their brain. We literally showed it on screen that there is, in fact, structural differences. Now you are recognizing those structural differences. Now you are admitting that certain structures have to be formed in a certain way and developed enough to actually be able to have semantic understanding. So why would you assume a 20-week-old fetus has semantic understanding, as opposed to, I don't know, a newborn infant or a 5-year-old or an adult?
I don't know, man.
Right. So you think it's okay. So again,
instantly
according to your
Holocaust,
logic,
yeah.
according to your logic, it should be okay to abort 20-week-old fetuses.
I guess so. Yeah.
And in fact, it should also be okay to
Abort
murder
2-year-olds.
newborn infant, because
True.
again, what evidence do you have that they have semantic understanding?
Nothing, I guess.
Like it should be easy for you to provide evidence of that too, because they're actually
he's
outside
just trolling him, man. Like I fucking hate it when he gets like this. Like it's bratty, Stephen. Right? Like I'm not gonna lie. Like it's just bratty. Like you do look bad when you do this. Like I genuinely, I'm coming out of this, Stephen. Like. You're just being a sore loser here. You're like, all right, yeah, I guess I do just want to kill infants. Yeah, this guy's so fucking stupid. Like, I'm just gonna try and say that this guy's ridiculous, crazy. In fact, like he's just ridiculous. Oh my god. And that's one of the reasons why I think he debates Richard, because I think he knows that he can twist the optics. Right, because essentially if Richard's past, if I'm being angry, he can just be like, well, look at this guy's behavior. Look at how he's behaved in the past. Like, don't listen to what he's saying. Like, don't listen to the words he's using. Don't listen to the argument that he's actually given. Like, oh, yeah, this guy's just, like, ridiculous. And he's trying to, like, impose upon me a belief that I don't have, even though I've, like, essentially conceded the entire debate because I didn't know what I'm talking about. And it was all essentially dependent upon my circular definition or circular conception of consciousness as semantic understanding in the first place, where I just basically equate having the capacity to learn language with having a conscious experience in the first place, and then for whatever reason map that onto a brain. But yeah, he's just ridiculous. He's just ridiculous. Like it's just like come on, man. Like you are embarrassing yourself at this point, right? Like I'm gonna be frank. Just be like, all right, look, mate, I can't tell you the neurological side of things. I don't know it enough. And you're right, you've actually pointed out something I don't know. Fair enough. I'll go and research it. Regardless, I still will continue eating animals because I don't care about animals. My whole moral, like when I talk to Cosmic Skeptic and everyone else, I don't care about animals. But I will go and I will research whether I should attribute consciousness or to infants. Not that that will matter anyway, because again, I will probably consider them extrinsically because they are essentially part of the set of humans. You know, like that's like essentially where it's gonna go. So even if all of this was successful, just be honest. Even if you are 100% right, I am going to double down because I am a subjectivist and I can just pick and choose what I value based on an arbitrary set of criteria that I'm making up right now. So just be honest. Like you don't lose anything. All he's doing is saying like, right, well, like if you apply that criteria, then you're essentially gonna have to be okay with killing children. But you don't want to do that because you want to say like, look, that sounds bad, and I want to sound clever, and I don't want it to be just because this is the way I like it, because that sounds stupid and I want to sound clever. So like, it's just like, just be honest. Just be honest, right, Stephen? Like that's all I think we're asking for, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're saying that you don't care about animals, just be like, I don't care about animals. I do care about fetuses. I'm not exactly sure why. I had thought that was related to consciousness, but now that you've pointed out that there mightn't be consciousness, I don't think it's that either. I think it's something else. That's all you would have to say, right? That's all he would have to say. And like, you know, what could vegan gains even say back? All right, fair enough. I guess consciousness isn't the thing that you're valuing, or like human consciousness isn't the thing you're valuing. It's just
to the womb, they can communicate on some level, right?
True,
like
true.
you can directly study them.
Yep.
So what evidence do you have that a newborn baby has semantic understanding?
Not a shred, I don't think.
Okay, so according to you, it should be okay to kill newborn
Yeah,
babies.
Shadow, you're in the chat saying like true, because that's exactly what you did, really. And with talking to vegan gains, you're just like, yeah, well, it all boils down to how I feel. So this is like, even if you you're like, I'm a descriptive, you know, it's like this is what you did with them.
Babies.
Seems like it, yeah.
Right, so you completely checked out of the debate, and you're doing this, yeah, seems like it, sure, because, you know, you're ridiculous.
Basically.
You do this every time.
Yeah, I do.
Right, okay, so, I just want to say one thing to your chat.
Uh-huh.
Please stop asking me to have sex with all your girlfriends, because a lot of people from chat come over to my OnlyFans. I don't do that. But if you want to give me Melina's number, feel free, Destiny. Take care.
Good luck, buddy.
Do they? Did they go? Did they go over like a lot of his chat? How much is he making on OnlyFans, man? You know, I hate the fact that like you know what? If anything, I just hate the fact that I'm not in good enough shape to have an OnlyFans. That's what I hate. I think that's where I sit. I sit at the point where I'm like it's not that I even want the OnlyFans. It's that I would like to have the option. You know, like as if like I'm in the situation where I know I couldn't do it, and that's what hurts. It's like, why don't I go to the gym? Okay. Lewis, can you debunk moral egoism? I mean, that's like a separate conversation, but I don't think egoism checks out, because the way that ego forms essentially relies upon a social interconnection between individuals. So you've got to recognize value in others, essentially, to form a sort of the sort of foundational ego that would be that sort of is referenced in an egoistic take. Before you can get the identity of the self, you need the identity of the community. You can't have just a particular without a universal. And I think, you know, like Kant, and I think specifically Hegel showed that. I am morally against OnlyFans because I don't want my girlfriend to do OnlyFans. But why not? Why don't you want your girlfriend to do OnlyFans? Okay. Why? What's wrong with your girlfriend doing OnlyFans? Is your girlfriend hot enough to do OnlyFans? Is it because you're scared your girlfriend will embarrass you if she does OnlyFans? Are you trying to say, Orgate, that you don't think your girlfriend is pretty enough to do OnlyFans? Because that's what I think you're saying. I think you're saying that you don't want your girlfriend to do OnlyFans because she'll embarrass you, and that will upset you because she's not pretty enough. That's what I heard. I don't know. Did everyone else hear that? I heard that. That's yeah. I mean, I heard it. You didn't speak, but I heard it. Perspective, I'm a minor, let me into your server. No. This is exactly what people will start saying to me if we allow it. I want to debate the moral egoist. Anything you recommend reading? I mean, Hegel's philosophy of right. Do you look at his rejection of social contractarianism, even, because essentially the egoist is essentially usually going to argue for a form of contractarianism. So look at his rejection of, like, if you put a copy of the Phenomenology of Spirit under your mattress and let it soak into you. Yes. Glorious. just absorb it. It's not even like it has to be like even like the beautiful thing about the spiritual connotation of the book is that it doesn't even have to be in material proximity for you. You just have to open your heart to the phenomenology, and it will enter you. Call me a conspiracy nut, but I don't think OnlyFans is genuinely funded by the public. Oh no. OnlyFans, man. They make they take 20% of what everyone earns on that platform, and some of them creators make some insane amount. They can make insane amounts of money, man. Like, and it's not just, and it is publicly funded. Like, so many people, like, I think you underestimate how many people will buy sex. Lewis, get your girl to do OnlyFans. I might. I need the money. I might. I'll be like, I'll do the Andrew Tate thing. I'll be like, right, okay, you've got to, you do OnlyFans. You give me all the money. Just give us it. Just give us the money. Isn't everyone on OnlyFans a paying member? No, they have free profiles before. I'm aware they actually make more because you can basically DM people like locked shit, or like there's locked stuff on the profile, and then they can unlock it by paying money. So it's like, it's kind of like free games, how free games make more money than paid games, because essentially, like, you get in, you get a taste, you're like, ooh, this is delicious, and then you realize you're like, oh fuck, I've just spent like 50 quid on League of Legends skins. This guy knows a lot about OnlyFans. I do know a lot about OnlyFans, right? Like, I do. Yeah. Well, what's your problem, right? Maybe I am on OnlyFans. You guys wouldn't know. I could be anonymous on OnlyFans. How do you think I afford this luxurious vegan lifestyle? Yeah, PP gets really enthusiastic every time he talks about OF. Only because I can't wait for your girlfriend to be on there, Olgate. Come on. So Olgate, what's your girlfriend look like? Why does she want to be on OnlyFans? Wait, you live in Ireland, right? So your girlfriend will be Irish, so she's Irish on OnlyFans. No wonder he needs money. You spend it on OnlyFans. That's it. Like, every dime I've ever got, I've just went like, I need that OnlyFans money. One second. I need to let the dog out because he's melting in here. I'm melting in here. Actually, you know, why haven't I got my window open? It's dark enough now. Alright. I'm waiting for Olgate to launch his OnlyFans. He should. He's actually in really great shape. You stupid. You're more likely to find pictures of me if you look, so be careful. Olgate, how would I even look? I don't even know. I'm not. Oh, wait, no, I do know your name. Oh, I do know your name. I was going to say, I don't even know your name. I was like, actually, I do. But I don't know your last name, so why would I be looking? Like, and even if I did know your last name, I'm not going to lie, Olgate, I wouldn't look. Right. So we'll see if anything is said. Wait, is this just going to be...
Dog? I think it's dog.
Like, stop. I'm basically... Oh, you want to drink, does he? Yeah, I am sweating in here. Oh. Mr. Schultz. Mr. Schultz. Oh, boiling. Okay. Right. So what's the rest of this going to be, right? Like...
He wants to share special experiences. If dogs can't feel love like humans, then what's the point of being?
Well, the dog howls and he's like, "Oh, this dog is capable of language. It has the same structures as a human. This
Absolutely.
is a consent."
Sounds like his girlfriend when he's fucking it. So why would it not be the same thing? You know, as long as they're making.
Dog is capable of language. It has the same structures as a human. This
Absolutely.
is a consent.
Sounds like his girlfriend when he's fucking it. So why would it not be the same thing? You know.
Oh, this dog is capable of language. It has the same structures as a human. This is
like, but the whole point of what he said prior was that it's not language, but that language is essentially an intermediary for having certain capacities. And then he asked, like, well, what is that capacity? And he was like, semantic understanding. And then he said, well, what's semantic understanding? He was like, qualia. And he's like, how do we know a being has this semantic understanding? And he says, like, having certain structures in the brain. Then you go, all right, but dogs have all those structures. And he's like, yeah, but they don't have language. It's like, who won the debate? Vegan Gains. Actually, Vegan Gains won this debate. Not because but just because Destiny did so poorly, more than anything. Right? Vegan Gains didn't get him to the point in which he's like making an argument about, like, where it's like to veganism or something like that, right? The Vegan Gains won this debate just by allowing Destiny to talk himself into the grave. That's how he won this debate. It was as simple as that. Destiny talked himself to death. Yeah. So Vegan Gains won this debate. Richard, well done. You won this debate.
Consent. Sounds like his girlfriend when he's fucking it, so why would it not be the same thing, you know? As long as they're making the same noises.
Okay. So my girlfriend, this chick I met, ended up being a fucking huge Vegan Gain simp. And
Oh, no, wait.
she said he always shouts out his OnlyFans. I'm like, I didn't know he had a fucking OnlyFans, and I've never heard him on stream shout.
Like, wait, why is this guy telling her that his girlfriend is a Vegan Gains fan and is mentioning his OnlyFans? Like, what?
Shout it out. Has he done it before with you, or is this the first time and I finally caught it?
I don't think he's done that before with me, but, you know, there's a first time for everything.
Well, shit. That's the first time I ever heard it.
It's not the first time your girlfriend's ever heard it, though, is it, Lycan?
I just came in because I wanted to clear up. He kept talking about phonomic differentiation or something. I think he was talking about phonemic differentiation. And this is.
All right, I'm not gonna sit here and listen listen to Wicked Supreme. Anyway, okay, right. So I hope you've all enjoyed this stream. Been eating at my uni cafeteria. I never ate better. I'm glad. I hope you've enjoyed yourself. I hope you've enjoyed yourself, man. And I hope everyone's had a good stream. So I hope you've all enjoyed this stream. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing. Really, I'm going to be taking this down and editing it. So don't be surprised if it does pop back up. When it does pop back up, please show it some love. You know, that kind of thing. Anyway, take it easy, guys. Check out the course, right? This is the last day of the summer sale. So if you're interested in checking out my course, a short introduction to Western philosophy, not short introduction, an introduction to Western philosophy, check that out because, you know, it'll take you from the ancient Greeks all the way to the contemporaries in every field of philosophy, right from, you know, Plato and Socrates, in metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and politics, all the way through to the contemporaries. And right now it's 50% off. And I've even done you all the benefit of creating of splitting it into modules. So if you want to buy just the metaphysics part and the epistemology part, you can buy that as a bundle for a greatly discounted rate. So it's like way less, and it's 50% off right now. So if you're like, oh, but I would do it, Lewis, but it's too expensive. Well, here's your chance to bag it 50% off and half the course. So considerably reduced rate. So if that's something you're interested in, check it out. I really appreciate it. And goodbye, my fellow philosophers. As always, try to gain some perspective.